Good morning, one and all. As the morning sun rises over the serene hills of Kottayam, we gather here at the prestigious Mahatma Gandhi University for a journey of transformation. We are not just here for a seminar, we are here to rethink the very fabric of where we live. We welcome to the inaugural day of reimagining citizenship with local governance. Over the next 6 days, we will explore how to move from being mere residents to becoming active citizens, shifting the focus from rigid institutions to collective stewardship and co governance. I welcome you all to the program. To set the stage for our first theme, from local self government to collective governance, we are honored to have a panel of visionaries who have shaped urban discourses across the globe. First, I welcome Srimati Sulojana Das as the Mayor of Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation and General Secretary of the Biju Janata Dal. She is the first women mayor of Bhubaneswar and a senior public leader with experience in governance and administration. She previously served as the State Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities, where she worked on strengthening rights-based institutional framework. As mayor, she has focused on improving civic services, strengthening urban governance, and enhancing citizen engagement. Her work reflects a commitment to inclusive, accountable, and participatory city governance. I welcome you, ma'am, to the panel. We are privileged to have Dr. C.T. Aravind Kumar, who is the Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University and a senior environmental chemist with over 3 decades of experience in teaching and research. His work focuses on environmental chemistry, water purification, air pollution, and polar studies. He has led several national and international collaborations and has over 400 publications. A Fulbright Fellow and leader of India's Arctic Expedition, he has also held key academic leadership roles, contributing significantly to leadership, environmental research, higher education, and policy discourse. I welcome you, sir, to the program. Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Sandeep Chashra, is a social anthropologist, activist, and human rights defender, currently serving as executive director of actionaid Association with over 3 decades of experience. His work spans land, labor, urbanization, and rights of marginalized communities. He is the managing editor of Agrarian South Journal of Political Economy, has been co-chair of the World Urban Campaign at UN Habitat. He works across grassroots movements and global platforms, contributing to debates on inequality, development, and democratic urban futures. I welcome you, sir, to the program. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Esther Maria Silva, as Associate Director at actionaid Association with over 30 years of experience in gender, labor, and social justice. She leads programs across southern India, working with Dalit women, informal workers, transgender persons, and other marginalized communities. Her work campaigns grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and institutional reform. She has contributed to initiatives such as Tamil Nadu Transgender Welfare Board, Land Rights for Women, and Rehabilitation of Bonded Laborers, and has led major humanitarian responses and livelihood programs. I welcome you, ma'am, to the program. Once again, I welcome everyone to the panel discussion, and I welcome Joseph, sir, Head of Communications actionaid, for the moderating. Thank you.
Thank you, Megha. Megha is one of the wonderful volunteers who's been helping us. And I would request, the indulgence of the audience because we have the privilege of having our next speaker present with us. And I would request him to join us on the stage. Professor M. Satish Kumar is with us. Please, sir, please come to the stage. Professor M. Satish Kumar is the Dean of Queen's University, Belfast, Gift City Campus, Gandhinagar, and a professor of global development and social transformation. Professor Satish Kumar was also very closely associated with the development of the Kerala urban policy. And it is a privilege, sir, of having you with us. Thank you very much, sir. Uh, you know, we are privileged to have the Vice Chancellor with us, and uh, we would be losing him because he's got a very urgent meeting after this. So I'm now proceeding with a little bit of a hurry to enable us to get all the benefit of his wisdom. So I'll just request Esther to give a formal welcome address, and then we'll proceed. Esther, ma'am.
A very good morning to all of you. It's my great honor and privilege to extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to each one of you to this distinguished gathering. The inaugural ceremony of the 11th Urban Action School on reimagining citizenship with collective local governance at the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. This year's school has been organized by ActionAid Association, AKP, RLS, in collaboration with Center for Urban Studies, Mahatma Gandhi University. We are gathered here at a moment of profound significance, a moment when cities across India and the global South stand at the crossroads of democratic promise and governance deficit. This 6-day Urban Action School is a space we have collectively envisioned to integrate, reimagine, and co-create the future of our cities, not merely as residents or beneficiaries, but as active, engaged citizens. It is my privilege to welcome our distinguished guests on the dais. I also extend a warm welcome to all eminent resource persons, scholars, urban practitioners, elected representatives, activists, and civil society leaders who will enrich our deliberations over the coming 6 days. And above all, a very special welcome to all the participants of this Urban Action School that have joined us from almost 15 states and union territories of our country. You are the heartbeat of the gathering. It is your curiosity, your questions, your lived experiences, and your collective imagination that will give meaning and energy to everything that unfolds here. Before we formally begin, allow me to take a moment to place this gathering in its larger context. The Urban Action School is an initiative of ActionAid Association, born out of the recognition that urban poverty, inequality, and exclusion demand not just policy responses, but a deeper transformation in how we understand governance, citizenship, and collective power. ActionAid has a long history of having served the vulnerable communities and groups in both rural and urban contexts. ActionAid Association has been working on this Urban Action School, and this has emerged as a space to build momentum for people's protagonism in the city and to actualize the right to the city, which is the way for just urban futures at this moment of crisis. Conceived as an immersive, participatory learning space, the Urban Action School brings together urban practitioners, elected representatives, academics, activists, civil society leaders, and young change makers to engage critically with the structures that shape our cities. It is grounded in the belief that transformative change requires both knowledge and solidarity, and that those most affected by urban injustice must be at the center of reimagining urban future. We have held 10 such schools and numerous other meetings, research projects, popular mobilization across the last decade and a half. Past editions of the Urban Action School have engaged with multiple themes, while in more recent years, we have focused on specific themes: workers and the city, urban rural continuum, climate just cities, and cooperative and decent work. Each time, deepening the conversation around what it means to govern cities justly and inclusively. This year, we have chosen the theme of urban governance to push this conversation further. So, what would be a better place than Kerala to hold this conversation? Kerala's long histories of democratic decentralization, people's planning, and community institutions like Kudumbashri provides the most fitting backdrop for this exploration. We welcome you not just to a program, but to a movement to reimagine what citizenship means, what cities can be, and who they are truly for. Once again, a warm welcome to all. Let us begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Democratic promise and a governance deficit is truly the moment that we are in. Before I call Professor C.T. Arvindan to give his address, may I take this opportunity to give a token of our respect to the three guests over here. There's a packet of tea, sir, that we've given you. There's a significance to this packet of tea because this is a creation of a livelihood initiative that we are doing in Wayanad with the survivors of the Wayanad landslide. My colleague Ice, may I request you to give it to Professor C.T. Arvindan? Thank you very much. And another token to Sulochna ji. Thank you very much. And to Professor Satish, please. I hope you do give good recommendations to this tea on all social media, so our women who are producing this tea get the encouragement. Now, without any further ado, please, with a warm round of applause, welcome Professor C.T. Arvindan to this.
എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. Esteemed guests and my dear friends, I once again welcome all of you to this beautiful campus, Mahatma Gandhi University campus. Well, a bit about Mahatma Gandhi University campus. In fact, this university was started in 1982. And when this was started, this is the first university to get a name Mahatma Gandhi, that attached to it. And over these 42 years, we have done reasonably well in the field of academics, particularly in research. So we are now 43, we have 43rd rank in NIRF among universities and also 17 among state universities in the country. And we are also globally ranked as between 501 to 600 by Times Higher Education ranking, which is the highest among all the universities in the state. And also we received the NAC A++ with a category 1 status. Again, that is first in this state. Well, this is just to boost, give kind of an advertisement to all of you. Like I want to give this advertisement for the tea, which in fact I would consider it would have been a big loss if I had not come here because this packet of tea. In fact, I like tea. I explore different kinds of tea. So thank you so much for the tea. Well, this is a university again which has actually benefited due to a series of conferences, seminars, workshops and all. And you would be surprised to know that we conduct almost about 10 to 15 international conferences a year in this campus. So that is That is our tradition, but mostly in science, but of course in social science as well, by this International Relation Department and Gandhian Studies and so on. So anyway, thank you so much. And also I once again welcome all of you to this campus. Then coming to the topic, these days it's a bit scary to say that, scary, citizenship and all that is bit, I should be very careful when I talk about the citizenship and all. So I don't want to talk too much on it anyway. But on the other hand, I in fact congratulate the department and also Professor Matthew and the organizers for organizing this program for reimagining citizens with collective local governance. Now, we are in a critical moment in India, urban journey, a moment defined by rapid expansion, transformation, and opportunity, but also by deep contradictions. Our cities are growing at an unprecedented pace. Skylines are rising, infrastructures are expanding, and new economic possibilities are emerging. Yet, alongside this growth, we witness governance systems that often struggle to keep up, systems that remain fragmented, overlaid, technocratic, and most concerningly, exclusionary. This is the paradox of contemporary urban India. While cities promise inclusion, innovation, and progress, their governance framework frequently fail to reflect the lived realities of the very people who sustain them. The Urban Action School 2026, through the collaborative efforts of the Center for Urban Studies at the School of International Relations and Politics, Mahatma Gandhi University, along with ActionAid and Rosa Luxemburg Stephen, creates a much needed space to confront this paradox. It's not merely a platform for discussion, but a space for critical reflection, dialogue, and reimagination. At the heart of this year's theme lies the idea of the citizen, a citizen who is not just a passive recipient of policies, but an active participant in shaping the city. Reimagining citizens means recognizing urban residents as agents of change, as co-creators of governance, and as voices that must be heard, especially those from marginalized and underrepresented communities. Now, collective local governance, and it's not just an administrative reform, it's a democratic imperative. It calls for decentralization, for participatory decision making, and for governance structures that are rooted in local context and realities. It challenges us to move beyond top-down approaches and instead foster systems where communities have ownership, agency, and voice. In this context, the role of academic institutions such as ours, then civil society organizations such as ActionAid, and global partners become crucial. Together, they can nurture new ideas, support grassroots initiatives, and build pathways for more inclusive and equitable urban futures. As participants of UAS 2026, each one of us has a role to play, whether as researchers, practitioners, policymakers, or activists. We are called upon to engage critically, to listen deeply, and to imagine boldly. Let this gathering be more than a conversation. Let it be a catalyst for new partnership, for innovative practices, and for a renewed commitment to cities that are not only smart and sustainable, but also just and inclusive. So in reimagining our cities, we are ultimately reimagining our democracy. Well, I would like to place on record the effort of this department, as School of International Relations, and the organizers for their timely action for organizing this kind of programs. And also, we are very much looking forward to all of you, particularly ActionAid and such organization, to continue your support and also continue the interaction. Well, personally, I'm very happy to see some of the ActionAid people because I have been indirectly interacting with ActionAid for so long, maybe about 40 years or so, right from my student days where I had a lot of friends who actually worked or were working in ActionAid. So once again, welcome all of you to this program and to this campus. Let this days will be very fruitful for all of you. And also, I welcome Mayor and others to this campus. So thank you so much once again. I hope I would like to stop here. So sorry that I have to leave also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for blessing us with your words of guidance and the reminder about the multiple terms which are linked with city, civilization, belonging, and ultimately the future of democracy. So thank you very much, sir. And thank you for being with us. And I would also like to just share that we have advertised some other speakers who we promise we are not shortchanging you. Reggie Zakaria will be joining us in the public meeting. He had said that, oh, I'm here for the Senate meeting, so I will also join us over here, but he could not come in the morning, but he will certainly be there in the public meeting and he will be sharing us with his words over there. So thank you very much. And I would now like to call on Sulochana ji to please grace us with her. And can we have a applause in farewell to Professor? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Sulochana ji.
Is there any time limit for me? That I should know it. Namaskar. Good morning, everyone. Honorable dignitaries on the dais, respected policymakers, social activists, and distinguished participants. It's truly an honor for me to be here to participate in this type of open discussion about reimagining citizenship with local governance. Thank you so much, ActionAid, for organizing this meeting and giving a platform to discuss Kichi Betha Kichi Katha. It's in Odia. Kichi Katha, it's Kichi Betha. That means something we are imagining, and whether we are able to implement it or not, that is the practical thing. Okay. The difference between imagination and implementation. So I'll share something from my experience. It's definitely a very good platform where we are not discussing about cities, but questioning how they are governed, and more importantly, who truly governs them. Because the truth is, cities are not run only from the municipal corporation offices, municipalities offices. They are shaped every day by people, by women, by workers, by communities, and by those who often remain unseen. And that is why the idea of citizenship is so powerful. What I mean, I don't know what you are thinking, but for me, it remains that all the citizens, they are not passive participants. They are active participants in shaping the future of the city. And as the elected mayor and directly elected mayor, so it is, for me, I feel that leadership is not just about position, it is something about accountability, trust, and accessibility. I don't know what other people feel, but for me, my people is first. Whatever I'm thinking about the citizen of Bhubaneswar. But let me say this honestly, that our cities are growing fast. Yet governance often struggles to keep pace. We build infrastructure, but sometimes forgotten inclusion. We design systems, but sometimes miss our peoples. So the shift we need today is very simple and fundamental. That is from governing cities to co-creating cities. When we are talking about Viksit India at the rate 2047, and all of us were moving towards this Viksit India, whatever each and every person claiming. The question before us is not simply how to build larger cities. The real challenge is how to build better cities. The cities where we'll find inclusivity, environmental sustainability, digitally empowered people, then culturally rooted people, and economically vibrant people. So my city, Bhubaneswar, you almost, I think some of persons are here, they've been to Bhubaneswar, they must have seen Bhubaneswar. I don't know whether they like it or not, but I love my city very much. I don't know why, but I can tell you topographically, climatically, if you will see, it's a beautiful city. The capital city of Odisha, uh, with around 15 lakh population. It was the first planned city in the state, in the country, but it expands on planned way. This is the ironic of my city. And it's very prone to natural disaster because it is situated near Bay of Bengal. Every alternative year, we are having cyclones and all these things. So it's very prone to natural disaster. But still then, my city is committed to all these visions. Always we have been trying to make this city sustainable, inclusive, and a very safe city, healthy city for all the citizens. By strengthening institutions, empowering citizens, and prioritizing sustainability, we aim to continue shaping our city into a cleaner, safer, and more livable urban ecosystem. That's why in Swachh Sarvekshan, our ranking last year, we got 9th position. When I became the mayor in 2022, it was 138. The position was 138, but within 4 years, we came to 9th position. So definitely the credit goes to the people of Bhubaneswar first. No doubt, Team BMC is working hard. We have been working day night, and you just can't imagine 13,000 women workers there working day and night to make the city. It's a beautiful city. In the field of sanitation, in the field of greenery, whatever you will see in the administration, everywhere you will see women, transgender, disabled persons, all are working tirelessly. So credit goes to them also, and ultimately the credit goes to the citizen of Bhubaneswar. First of all, we are concentrating on citizen-centric services. Whatever we are planning for the benefit of our citizen. Not only that, whatever we are planning with the consultation of the people. So citizen comes first to us. So our cities, we are trying to build not only for the people, with the people. That is our motto. Whatever we'll want to make, we'll make according to the suggestion of the people of Bhubaneswar. That is why we are getting satisfaction that our process of growth is very inclusive, because we are trying to involve all the citizens of Bhubaneswar into the growth process. They are all thinking that this is my city, that belongingness should be there. That belongingness should be there. So over the past decade, Bhubaneswar has consciously pursued a model of citizen-centric urban governance that integrates institutional strengthening, participatory planning and budgeting, sustainable infrastructure, and technology-enabled service delivery. Another thing I have to say that one of the most important steps we have taken is decentralizing governance. We have 67 wards, and in each ward, we have ward offices. So the people of Bhubaneswar, they are getting all the services at the doorstep. They don't have to come to the Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation's head office. Rather, they are getting it their doorstep. So that is the most important thing. And another thing is sustainability and inclusivity. We are giving much more importance to women. We are giving importance to the workforces, small traders, small business persons, transgenders, etc., those who are marginalized. They are actively participating in the whole process. We are trying to make the city more inclusive and sustainable by taking some steps like water treatment and storage infrastructure, ensuring safe water supply to each and every person. We are also trying hard to treatment our wastewater. So many initiatives like universal household water connections, rejuvenation of traditional water bodies are also helping and creating a very sustainable urban water system in our city. In waste management, the city has implemented a comprehensive approach that includes door-to-door waste collection, segregation, recycling, composting, and scientific waste disposal system. And in all these process, so many women workers, they are engaging themselves in the process. Another step for the sustainability, we are encouraging plantation. You know, Bhubaneswar is very prone to natural disaster. Every year we are losing our green belt, but still then is a green city till today because massive plantation we are doing. And in the Miyawaki plantation scheme, we are planting lakhs of trees within small sphere. In small place, we have been creating dense forest. So that works like lungs. So lungs of the city. So in that way, also we are maintaining the sustainability factor. We are promoting cycles, bicycle schemes are there. This initiative reflect that our cities must prioritize mobility system that are efficient, exclusive, and environmentally responsible. All these we are trying hard to make the city sustainable and inclusive. So these are the major things we are doing for our citizens. Again, for the unorganized sector, those who are working in that sector, we are also doing something for them, like it's a growing city. So construction workers are more. We have so many slums in our city. A registered slum, we have 483. It's a massive thing. So it's a no doubt a challenge for us to cope with the whole thing when we are imagining the Viksit India 2047. So these people, they have the right to stay in a very good atmosphere. तो इसलिए हम लोगों ने उन लोगों के साथ मिल के ही काम करते हैं. जैसे वी आर प्रोवाइडिंग 9 वर्टिकल्स टू ईच एंड एवरी स्लम्स. इसमें वाटर कनेक्शन, रोड्स, देन सैनिटेशन एंड रिक्रिएशन सेंटर्स, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी टू ईच हाउसेस, ये सब सारे प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं. और इन द जागा मिशन स्कीम व्हिच वाज इनिशिएटेड बाय आवर फॉर्मर चीफ मिनिस्टर श्री नवीन पटनायक जी, तो इसमें जो स्लम्स में रहते थे उन लोगों को इन सिटू उसी जगह पे हम लोगों ने बहुत अच्छा बिल्डिंग बना के उनको दे रहे हैं. तो that creates a very inclusive atmosphere in our city, and the people of Bhubaneswar, those who are feeling allure that we are marginalized, we are workers and all these things, now they are settled in a very good houses. In that way, we are also providing inclusivity to our city. Another thing for our daily wage earners and other people, we have prepared so many shades and temporary shades and permanent shades to stay for some times for their recreation and all this thing. We have been taking so many steps to for their skill development, and we have opened scratches for the working class of people. Those who are working, they can't afford, even the weaker section, they can't afford to keep their children into good classes. So free of cost, we are providing classes to these unorganized sectors people. So these are the systems we are taking to make the city sustainable and inclusive. And so many non-government organizations, they are extending their hands to help us in this matter. So let me conclude by saying that the future of India will be written in their cities. So if we build good cities that are resilient, inclusive, and people-centered, we will build a nation that is strong, equitable, and prosperous. Platforms like this dialogue are extremely valuable because they allow us to learn from each other, collaborate, and collectively shape the urban future of India. Thank you so much for inviting me here and providing a platform to discuss all these things for a better future. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sulochana ji. And above all, I must admire Sulochana ji for her courage. She has come all the way from Odisha to Kottayam, which is a lovely city, to speak about her love of Bhubaneswar. and her love of Bhubaneswar and the way in which she, as the mayor of Bhubaneswar, is serving Bhubaneswar. And it's true because all of us love our homes. I'm somebody who has roots to Kerala, but I was born and brought up in Delhi. And I love Delhi with the same kind of fervor and intensity that Sulochna ji loves Delhi, loves Bhubaneswar. Croydon slip, my apologies. But uh, the point is, but she's come over here to share about what she has been able to achieve in Bhubaneswar. And she's come over here also to learn more from what is happening in Kerala so that she can better serve her citizens in Bhubaneswar. So, you know, these things, the love of home is something which we need to respect and sort of look in terms of the context of how we place our position in terms of this vast, diverse country. And as she said over here, there is a question of how governance is lagging behind the growth in cities, and we need to learn from each other to see how best we can do this. Sulochna ji also started with this thing of katha and vyatha. That is in terms of what the imagination is and what the reality is. So we have very, talked about this whole thing in terms of reimagining. So our school over here, and with the help of the participants, we are looking in terms of how we can reimagine the urban futures of our country, keeping in mind both the flight of our imagination and what is actually implementable on the ground. So thank you very much for the guidance that you're giving us. Satish Kumar ji, I know that you have a full lecture after this, but I would request you to share a few opening remarks that you could give over there, and I'll give you a little moment to think of what you would like to say at this particular moment, which is separate from what the lecture that you will be giving later on. Meantime, I would request Esther. Esther, apart from the welcoming address, has prepared some context setting based on her work in Chennai and her PhD work that she has been recently awarded. So, Dr. Esther Aman, may I request you to come, please? And then, Professor, after that, a few words. Dr. Esther Aman, please.
Yeah. Once again, good morning to you. And it's basically an honor to be part of the Kerala Urban Policy Commission. Joining Kila, we had the privilege, ActionAid Association, the South Cluster had the privilege of doing a study on making Kerala's urban governance inclusive. So my talk is actually based on our own findings from the ground. So this study was actually conducted in 3 different districts of Kerala, Trivandrum, then Thrissur and Wayanad. So basically we looked at the different municipal corporation and municipality and the census town. So I just would like to begin with not with the data, but the voice from the ground. We have actually taken about 6 locations in these 3 districts, and we have spent about nearly a week in each of the location to know from the people's perspective. It's basically Thrissur Corporation, Kalpata Municipality, and Vanganur Census Town. We held, it's an empirical study. We held focus group discussions, basically a qualitative research. And in this research, we had in-depth interviews with different stakeholders who are part of the location. Like, for example, we had an opportunity to interact with sanitation workers, gig workers, migrant laborers, tribal community, transgender persons, and sex workers. It's basically like street vendors, domestic workers, elderly residents, and farmers. It's basically looking at how they are actually navigating and negotiating, and how they are actually being part of shaping the urban governance. So what we heard was not primarily a demand for a better road or faster water connection, though the demands existed as part of our research. But however, what we heard was basically from the people that is something very fundamental. Like, for example, a gig worker, a delivery rider in Tissue told us that his uniform, it is actually the one, his platform mandates that he wears it. But however, in reality, that badge itself becomes a kind of social exclusion. He was visible to the city, in the street where he was actually delivering, but invisible to the city in the ward committees. That is what he has said. And a woman street vendor in Trishur, our fear is not about just rain, because we know that nowadays cities are actually often, they face the natural calamities like flood, rains, and things like that. Which flood, which is, she says that in the evenings, when she's in the market and when the market is empty, our vulnerability multiplies. Okay. A tribal community person from Pania community in Calcutta told us that their traditional ecological knowledge, the people they carry about in terms of local watersheds or forest systems, had never in his memory been invited into a formal environmental planning process. Marginalized community always being left out of the formal planning process. Like, every voice was actually different, but the message was very clear. We are not against governance, but we are against being governed without being heard. That's the message, loud and clear. That demand to be recognized as a co-author of decisions that shapes our one's own life. Okay, that is the moral and intellectual foundation of this urban school as we all gathered here. The word we are reimagining. Okay, let's spend a moment with a central word in our theme, citizenship. As the VC also pointed out, talking about citizenship is something very scary. Okay, not citizenship, it is citizenship. Okay, the difference is not typographical, it is a conceptual commitment rooted in the lived experience of the people I've just described. Okay, national citizenship is often experienced vertically as a relationship between individual and the distant state. It's mediated by various documents, entitlements, and elections being held in once in 5 years. It matters enormously, no doubt. Okay, but it does not capture what it means to inhabit a city. Okay, to share a drain, a market lane, a community water tap, a flood-prone, low-lying neighborhood with hundreds of thousands of others who are differently positioned, differently vulnerable, and differently powerful. Okay, citizenship is horizontal. In the practice of co-producing the city, not just living in it, but shaping it, governing it, and inheriting the consequences of its governance together. When our research team, they conducted PLA, participatory learning action, and they did amenity mapping and problem prioritization, social relationship mapping, and vision mapping in Trishu, Kalpata, and Bangalore. What emerged was not a list of complaints from the people. It was a vision, of urban spaces that are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. What our mayor also just now spoke about from Bhubaneswar's experience, giving varied examples, shaped by those who know the most intimately. They are the peoples who know about their own lived experience. I just would like to mention here, John Rawls argued that inequalities in a just society are only justifiable when they benefit the least privileged. Our research asks the other question, what does justice look like in a city where the least privileged are also the least heard, the least counted, and the least visible in every governance processes? Henry Leverbre answered this question with his concept of right to city. The right to the city cannot be conceived as a simple visiting right or as a return to traditional cities. It can only be formulated as a transformed and renewed right to urban life. Reimagining citizenship is therefore not a semantic exercise, it is an act of democratic reconstruction, insisting that city is not a service to be delivered, but a commons to be collectively governed. While saying this, I was just recollecting when we were working in the city of Chennai, we wanted to actually lobby with the policymakers to provide housing for the homeless community. When we identified certain commons in the city, and we used RTI to get those information and advocated, later on, our policymakers, our decision makers told us that those spaces are meant for some other purposes. So this is how like the commons actually not really benefiting the least privileged people. What the evidence reveals and what it conceals. Now, let me turn to evidence, both national picture and what our research in Kerala adds to it. The national picture first, we all know that Indian population stands at 36.87% in 2024, projected to reach 600 million, that is 40% of the country by 2036. Urban India already contributes to 63% of GDP, projected to rise by 70% in 2025 to 26. Yet India's urban local bodies collect own revenues of less than 1% GDP. We need to think about it. Among the weakest municipal fiscal positions of any comparable democracy, a CAG performance audit in 2023 confirmed that 30 years after 74th Amendment, ward committees remain hollow and district planning committees non-functional in most states. Over 40 million workers in India are informally employed, approximately 80% of urban workforce, contributing enormously to city economies while reimagining outside labor law, social protection, and democratic voice. We all know that the eShram portal, which came into existence soon after COVID, almost about 94% of the registered informal workers earn less than 10,000 per month. And over 74% of them belong to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC communities. India's 7.7 million gig workers projected to reach 23.5 million by 2029-30. This is Niti Aayog. They are logistically central yet democratically invisible. But here is what our ActionAid research adds, and it matters especially here in Kerala. Kerala has transformed from 7.8% urban in 1901 to 47.72 in 2011, with census towns growing, the numbers are there. And these figures actually shows like how the urbanization is taking place in a scale. And it's actually making it most urbanized state in India by a significant margin. Last month, Kerala became the first state in India to frame a dedicated urban policy. Mr. Atikenjadi, yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. And it's really like it's set an example for the other states also to follow this line. Yeah. Kerala has real achievements. 50% reservation for women in local bodies, participatory budgeting, Ward Sabha, Kudumbashri, and the women-led Harita Karma Sena in waste management. These are genuine, nationally significant democratic innovations. However, our research finding shows that participation in ward meetings was largely tokenistic. This is based on the lived experiences of our interaction with the marginalized community, particularly for marginalized groups. Tribal communities showed starkly different levels of engagement. Like the Kuruma and Kurichia communities showed more active participation, while the Paniyan community remained almost entirely excluded from meaningful governance process. And Kerala's 2.5 to 3.1 million migrant workers, constituting 7.5 to 9% of the population, predominantly they are in the construction sector, manufacturing, and various other services. They face housing insecurity and they lack healthcare access, have no knowledge of their rights, and encounter language barriers that make formal governance channels inaccessible for these people. Yeah, I can actually go on and narrate the different marginalized section workers. I just move further. However, all these findings, they lead us directly to what Dr. Ambedkar's foundational warning. Political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of its social democracy, a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life. Even Kerala, with its Ward Sabhas and Kudumbashri, various other factors, there are challenges. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. The questions the school must not avoid. One is, whose knowledge governs the city? Okay. And it's basically, we need to look into how the voices of the marginalized community, how their knowledge is actually taken into account. Like, for example, various things like they face so many occupational hazards and they receive minimum institutional support, and women workers facing additional gender specific risks. There are so many things. And yeah, without proper, in the Vengano census town, without proper documentation or language support or institutional recognition, they sustain that the town's construction and caregiving infrastructure and knows that it's all a failure of governance in their respective location. Those are the challenges from the ground. Well, for paucity of time, I think let me conclude. Maybe like those who are interested in the findings of our study, I can later share the executive summary of our research. I just would like to quote here the ancient Tamil Sangam poet Kaniyan Pungunjanar wrote more than 2000 years ago. It's in Tamil. Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, which means every place is my hometown and every person is my kin. Okay, so that's it's basically a radical refusal of, okay, it's a radical refusal of exclusion. The insistence that the city belongs to all who inhabit, that no one's presence is conditional on their economic productivity, formal legal status, caste, or social position, is the deepest statement of what citizenship means. Okay. I just would like to conclude by saying the city belongs to its citizens. This week, let us prove it. Welcome to the 11th Urban Action School. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther ma'am. And I just want to share that the research that Esther ma'am was talking about was something that was commissioned by the Kerala Urban Commission, and the Kerala Urban Policy has listened to the gaps that SMM has spoken about and has recommended to institute workers' councils as part of the city urban governance system to be able to do it. So the question is, we do need to look in terms of reimagining governance to ensure that there is a process of achieving the alternative against which Ambedkar had sort of warned us against. That is to ensure that political democracy that we have actually leads to deepening social and economic democracy, and that's the promise of governance that Esther ma'am had talked about. Sir, a few brief remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was really excited when Tikender mentioned about the urban school. And I know that there's lots to speak about the Kerala Urban Policy Commission, but I'm not going to go into details. The book has been published. I'm just explaining that Academic Foundation has published the book. So the book should be available in the stalls very soon. So here's a pitch about the Kerala Urban Policy Report, which has been, it's path-breaking in the sense we were the first state. Kerala is the first state to take the initiative. So congratulations to Kerala. In terms of the perspective that has emerged in the morning, and especially from the mayor from Bhubaneswar as well, and Esther as well, who's been one of our co-partners, particularly in the context of the Urban Policy Commission report. I just wanted to emphasize that I spent almost 27 years in a city which was a divided city, a city which was highly divided because of the conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants. Something which I never expected I would spend a lot of time working in that city. So I spent almost 47 years teaching about urban and urban studies. And having come from that experience, I spent 27 years in Queens, in Belfast. And having come there, I had to rejig all my perspectives, all my theories, okay? Because what we studied does not matter, does not work in the reality. So what's true of Belfast is not true of Kerala. What's true of Kerala is not true of Uttar Pradesh. So we have to be very clear that urban policies, urban theories have to be guided by the framework, by the context in which we are trying to locate. So it's extremely important to understand, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail. But just to give you a perspective that when I was asked to take charge of the Urban Policy Commission, I have made up my mind that we cannot have a top-down approach to urban policy. A policy which is decided in Delhi by 3 or 4 departments, put a chapter together and publish it. That was not what my intention was. My intention was that we need to have a bottom-up and top-down approach. We need to bring every stakeholder to have come together in this conversation. So we actually, the theme, in fact, when I finally wrote the introduction, and Tikender, of course, gave the most important section on collective governance, governance 3.0, if I remember that clearly. So our report itself, just to summarize, is about prioritizing people. So people is in the center of urban policy. And Urban Policy Commission's report says prioritizing people, enhancing resilience. Enhancing resilience is extremely important. While we talk about change, we are being impacted by climate change. Climate change is one of the biggest threats. Yes, we have the war going on in the Hormuz Straits. Yes, we have the big conflict regarding oil and gas. But the reality is that all of these conflicts add to the vulnerabilities of cities and states and people. So enhancing resilience is, of course, about enhancing resilience of the people, social resilience, political resilience, economic resilience, and also climate resilience. So resilience is much bigger in the way we emphasized and projected in the report. The other is, of course, the third strand of the Kerala Urban Policy Commission report is about strengthening collective local governance. So we have had almost 74 years of independence. We have had the 74th Amendment Act since 1992, almost 30 plus years. But very few states have shown the ability to translate the Amendment Act, 74th Amendment Act, at the grassroots level. Kerala has been very fortunate to be able to take it and decentralize it. And I think from our point of view, from the Commission's point of view, the Kerala Urban Policy Commission report was successful, will be successful, has already been successful, I would say, because the budget has been allocated. It has been endorsed by the 16th Finance Commission. So one takeaway for all of you, and I'll come back to it when I'm giving a presentation later. One takeaway for all of you to understand that while India is moving rapidly into the urban space, as people are moving rapidly away from the villages into the rural areas, okay, what we observe is that transition from rural to urban, there has been no allocation of funding. Viksit Bharat nahi ban sakta jab tak aap allocation nahi karenge. And I want to make it very clear that allocation for that transition is extremely important. We made that recommendation to the Finance Commission in Kerala. We made that recommendation in our policy report, and that recommendation is now moved up into the national level for the recognition that we need to invest in the transition. We need to invest in the transition of the people. People's cultures also have to be supported as they move from the rural to the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 towns and to the big cities. So these are important times. And I think we should be able to really appreciate the fact that we are living in interesting times. We are living in interesting times where we have an opportunity to really transform the thinking from the bottom up, to transform the thinking from the top as well, and to be able to communicate the significance of why living in the cities is important. But Kerala is different. Kerala has a rural-urban continuum, and Kerala's rural-urban continuum has to be sustained. How do you sustain it? Facts for people from Kerala, that what we saw in the commission was the fact that there are more people now who refuses to travel by bus. Everyone wants to have their own cars. So Kerala is rapidly moving into a state where everyone has multiple ownerships of cars. Okay, so this change is quite significant because public transportation, the idea of egalitarian transportation has gone, and we are all into individualized transportation, which has much more direct impact on the environment, on the community, and everywhere. So a lot of things to talk about it, but thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, to bring a kind of a very note of reality to the poetic questions of Katha and Vyatha, and how you said that allocations is an important thing to ensure the transition from Katha to Vyatha. So, friends, we are coming to an end to this inaugural session, and I would like Sandeep ji to come and give his inaugural remarks to guide us in the next 6 days. Sandeep ji.
Inaugural remarks at the closing, yeah?
Of the inaugural session.
So, thank you. Can you hear me? Abhi sunai de raha hai? So, members on the dais, very, very esteemed Mayor of Bhubaneswar, our Honorable Ms. Sulochana Dasi, we are honored that you're here. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Professor M. Satish Kumar, it's a singular privilege to have you on the dais, and we will get into the session pretty soon. As you know, he's reshaping urbanization. So he said he's been teaching, he's an academic. I think it's something much more. He's an urban thinker and activist, in my opinion, because he's reshaping narratives and he's reshaping actions. So thank you for being here. And Tikendraji, it was an honor that you were in the audience, and you were also at the Policy Commission on the question of governance. My colleague Esther on the dais, very nice to hear what you said about your micro studies and the warm welcome. Professor Aravinda Kumar has left. He's a much revered Vice Chancellor of this lovely university. And it's wonder to have a partnership. It's for us, it's an expression of joy. And Matthew Verghese, who's sitting right in front, Professor, thank you for making this happen. This would not have been possible without you. A big round of applause to Mahatma Gandhi University, our colleagues from ActionAid who've worked hard to make this happen, but also the silent partner here, the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, a foundation of, what do we say, progressive, it's a debatable issue right now, but a left party in the German parliament whose vote shares are falling, and it's a matter of concern. But they'll be here, and we are privileged to associate with them over some years in advancing praxis, in advancing urban action. Some of the speakers will be with you from the Rosa Luxemburg, Ms. Britta Peterson and Mr. Rajiv Kumar. They're not here today, but I wish to thank them in absentia, and they will share their thoughts with you. The school is really for you, comrades and colleagues here. What my colleague Esther was speaking to in terms of the ethical center or the hinge of the Urban Action School and the schools before it have been those who attend it. Among you are, of course, teachers I saw, and it's a privilege, ma'am, and many others who are here, students, scholars, activists. What I am, mere social workers, that's how I call myself. So some of our mere social workers I can see from Andhra Pradesh, 15 states, right? And probably grow. You are the reason we are here. So please realize and assert, it's not just about realizing, but please assert your centricity to how the school goes. To all the student volunteers who are volunteering from the Mahatma Gandhi University, my kudos. And the fact that you will help these people and us all to realize where we go forward. It's a very energetic process. I'm sure the energy, which is somewhat silent at the moment, especially at the back benches, will probably assert itself on the front benches as Professor Satish Kumar comes in for the next substantive session, a much awaited session. And then Dr. Sarda Muralidharan joins him. That's where we are. For ActionAid, this is some 11th or so urban action school. Sorry, Esther, if I'm repeating anything, I'll try not to. This is the 11th one, and we come from a background of praxis. So for us at ActionAid, the idea is not just theory, and the idea is not just mindless practice. So that's the word, the word theory and action both in a progressive sense. So we come from the background of praxis, and the urban action schools, the 11th version this time, but many other schools, the humanitarian schools that we are starting to run now, or the labor schools or the worker schools that we run across, these are popular schools. Some in the classrooms such as these, or what's called auditoriums such as these, somewhat plush. Some in more open, sweaty spaces at the workers' sites, on the ground at the community contestation sites. So we come from that background, and that is where you will see the history of so-called urban action within of my organization, which I have the honor and the privilege of leading for now, of all of this work that we do. So for us, the urban action schools have a long history. I'll not bore you with its history, although I know history is crucial for lessons and therefore for the future. So I'll not get into that too much, but just to let you know, these are the shortened versions of the urban action schools. So we as organization, the ActionAid that I'm talking of and others face humongous challenges, and these are not just resource, these are existential challenges, which I must not be, what I say, I must not be tongue-in-cheek to express here, like the question of citizenship itself. And therefore, it is an uphill task for us. So there were month-long schools, 1 month long sort of length schools in the first 4 years or 5 years of the history of urban action schools. And then there have been these week-long ones. And I hope it stays at week-long, although I'm not very sure at this stage that it should not get into one-day schools because there's too much, as Professor Satish Kumar will just expose a little later, what is the question of the city. So I think that's where we're coming from. The last school was on the question, so just to get the politics before you, the last school was centered on the question of working people in the city. The one before that was centered on the question of urban-rural continuums, which I'm sure will be talked to a lot, and it's a vexed question of our urbanization here. The one before that was on the question of what people do and the cooperation and the solidarity economies. climate change, and so on and so forth. So it's a long sort of beauty history. This one, let me quickly come to. And I try and Joseph, I'll try and be short in as much as I can. I'm the last and the least speaker here. So I'll try to sort of summarize what I want to say. This one is focused on the question of governance. I mean, we've, of course, given it epithets that you can read for yourself, collective, the question of citizenship that demonstrates where we're coming from as collective thinkers. This school is not just designed in some hidden quarters of ActionAid, it's collectively designed by your university and yourself, Mr. Verghese, but also by ex-mayors such as Tikendraji and your law faculty, Nalsar, right? Dr. Laksh Yog, so many others, my own colleagues who've come from very different experiences. So that reveals the politics that we have with reference to governance. Governance, as we all know, I'll just sort of put it in a summary, is essentially a question of governance for what, governance for whom, governance with what purpose, and governance to what end. So therefore, centrally, it's a question of democratization. When we talk of city governance, urban local governance, the major issue is the question of power, and the major issue is of the question of democratization. So if you're talking in the urban context, urban governance, with what function, with what future, with what purpose, for whom, essentially boil down to the question of who, and there's a class question. It's a sort of social question, the caste question, if I may, the question of religion, as you just hinted to. So essentially, we have to interrogate urban governance from those perspectives. And I think that is really the purpose of this school. It's not just to look at the past of what's really happening, but it's also to look at the futures, or the urban futures we are going to build in manners which romance justice, in manners which romance equality, as Esther was alluding to, within the city, in manners that enhance livability or romance livability, in manners that enhance or advance, if I may call it, the whole question of the sustainability of the kind of cities. There are, and in the sessions in the next days, you'll hear about the issue of sustainability much more. But if we start to sort of look at it from those dimensions, then questions should occur in our mind. The usual sort of issues that keep occurring to my mind are issues around how, I mean, if you travel around the Indian cities, and of course, each city has its own character, but one notices across the world, across the countries of the global south, you will notice a tremendous, almost a monologic homogeneity in the cities, in the way they are being built for future. So one sees a tremendous kind of homogeneity and leads us to question, where is this mind map of building future cities coming from? I mean, where is this virus, if I may say? Who's putting that virus in the minds of our city makers, city planners, in the minds of our city governors? That's lo and behold, almost all cities start to look alike. The cities are in a continuous process of building, rebuilding, and breaking. Wherever you go, it's almost apocalyptic. This whole sort of story of building, breaking down, widening, again building, again breaking down, and the associated stories of evictions, of enclosures, all of those related stories. That's the one kind of trend that you would see. If you interrogate it further, and I'm sure as people, as students you do, as activists you do, there seems to be another very homogeneous secular trend across the different cities of the world, that you have overcrowding and issues that Professor Satish Kumar quickly alluded to, migration and workers in the cities. But there's a pattern there, and there seem to be two faces of each city. The overcrowded faces of the city, where you have people falling over each other, built up spaces falling over each other, slum-like settlements, in non-tenable areas on the one side, which contain about 60 to 70% of the city populations, or more so in the case of Bombay, for instance, about 90%. And then you have these lesser crowded spaces in the cities, where you have vistas, where you might have golf courses, Interestingly, when Hugo Chavez was leading Venezuela, he gave an order to demolish all the golf courses in Caracas as a class sort of future. So you have those areas with nice houses, serene, sort of spaces to walk, lesser traffic, better cars, better kept roads. So almost a trend almost everywhere where you see apartheid-like cities, the two faces of the city. And pick up any Google map of any city and you will see this narrative, what I'm trying to convey in adjectives much more clearly and visually. So that's seemingly the trend. And therefore, the moot question for us as people who want to change futures is simple, that where is this coming from and what function does it serve? So it's a question of the past. So where does it come from? So how do we inherit such kind of nonsense? And number two, what current function is it serving? So it's not it's just being reproduced mindlessly. It must serve some function, a hidden function perhaps, and we should expose those hidden functions. Sometimes when I look at the building and the rebuilding of the cities, I invoke the imagery of a dog running after its tail continuously in a secular manner and never finding the tail. So it seems to be that kind of an image. So we must interrogate where does it come from and what current function does it serve? So on the first, I have my views, and I'm sure those who come from the trajectory of left, those who come from the trajectory of reading history in an analytical manner will probably agree with me. But it's a debate, and I think we should have this debate. It comes from the colonial legacy of how cities in the global north were built. These have been well analyzed. It's not something I'm expounding a new theory here. How those cities were built in the global north, what they rode on the back of. All of those cities on the modern day that you see them, Brussels if you take, London if you take, or any of those other global northern cities, Paris if you take, they were built on the backs of colonial accumulation, huge colonial accumulation, which got in wealth for labor-intensive manufacturing and industrialization. The first industrial revolution, is that right? The first or the second? No, I think the first industrial revolution. But also the fact that at the back of this labor-intensive industrial revolution and urbanization, Charles Dickens writes about it in great detail in his storybooks, and you will see what London was like at that time. But also on the fact that at that stage in time, the surplus rural populations, the agrarian serfs, freed then, there was a possibility to export them into settler colonies. We may quibble about numbers, but some numbers will tell you 50 million of that time population of that time Europe was exported into settler colonies in Australia, in the Americas, in the South of Americas, in parts of Africa. So it was built on that beautiful cities, that large cities, that vistas. So it's all stolen ideas, stolen wealth. And it's not really the idea. And we seem to be trying to do the same thing here, historically, if you look at it. Without realizing that we have millions of people who are out of agriculture really, because agriculture can't meaningfully sustain them. And we haven't had land reforms of any measure. So there are landholding inequities of humongous kinds, even today, despite our early romance with land reforms. So we have surplus rural populations hidden because they are working in precarity even now. So working what is called in way less wages or in a way of underwork. And the fact that we cannot recreate those conditions. We can't kick people out. We can't drown them in the Indian Ocean or export them into some other kind of settler sort of settlement. So we will have cities which are growing endlessly and will grow endlessly. And there is a major issue there. What do you do with urbanization? Do we imagine those kind of cities? But it also produces what I said the other day at the book launch of Sri Tikendra Panwar. He's edited that book. It's a wonderful book. You must read it, called The City Limits. It's a tale of agonies and maladies of the cities, of what's really happening to people in the cities. They're death rattles in the cities, but also for the fact that what I said there was it's also an ecological dead end. You can't have livable futures. I mean, I come from Delhi where every health data will tell you. And some of us who are from Delhi know this, that 12 years of our 11.9 years of our life by some estimates is knocked off by just the fact of living in Delhi. So this isn't an isolated case. If you go to Kanpur city, probably the same story. If you go to, I don't know, ma'am, Bhubaneswar, how many years of life the city, living in the city itself knocks off, perhaps much lesser. But we're talking of futures, we're talking of the next 30 years. So they're not sustainable, they're not livable. They're not just taking lives away, they're also taking livelihoods away. Climate disasters were spoken to at an increasing rate. So in some ways, this isn't going to serve, that history is not going to serve the future or as a pathway to future. But one must then ask the second question. So why is it there? What function does it serve? And I think there is an important debate there you all should ask and talk about. To my mind, once again, the continuous building, rebuilding, and breaking the city serves a very crucial capital function. Very, very crucial. You see, financial capital or any forms of capital, the most accumulation takes place in wars. We have a number of them going on. The military expenditures and the bombs and the weaponization and the weapons of mass destruction, capital grows pretty soon there. The more the wars grow, the more the profits grow, the more capital accumulation takes place. Where it goes, you know where it goes. It doesn't certainly come to redistribute it to us, yeah, in any meaningful way. But the other way, of course, natural resources, extractive industry, the capture and the privatization of commons, whether in the city or in the rural areas, those are frontiers for capital accumulation, as is the issue of urbanization. This building, rebuilding, continuous breaking down serves the function of capital accumulation in a massive, calculated manner. I have not the data, and that's not the purpose of my intervention here, but you can look at data country by country in terms of what capital it accumulates, to whom, and at what cost. So I think this is the current function it serves. The second, this whole question of the two faces of the cities is a continued social exclusion function. What is it? How come when my daughter was going around and counting in middle upper class household, the number of Sharmas, the number of Varmas, with no offense meant to anybody, the number of Chattopadhyayas or the number of Bandyopadhyayas and the number of Sinhas. So if you go to those nice areas in the city, the ones that I spoke of in latter ways, those beautiful places, you will barely ever see a Dalit family name. You will barely, in these days and ages, apart from feudal Muslim descendants, you'll barely ever see a Muslim surname. You probably will never see, apart from some government officer, an indigenous surname. So it serves that kind of a caste function, indigeneity function, but it also serves a class function. So when I say apartheid cities, it could be basis of race that we've seen in ancient, in not so ancient, till the struggle of South Africa, maybe some decades ago, and continued the re-rise of racism. But we also see it here very much, right? It continues to serve that exclusion function. Look at the way cities even now are building their spaces, the public spaces, public housing spaces, high income group colony, middle income group colony, lower income group colony. Yeah? And these are excluded areas. You don't have mixed spaces. So is the damn mindset of what we are doing? Who is going to challenge all this? I mean, look at the fact that today you don't have mobility available, free mobility in cities. I mean, we have the constitution, we have those articles of movement meaning physical movement. But are the cities really that for domestic workers? Are they that? Can a domestic worker transcend RWA with freedom for using a park within of that damn built up area? She can't. Unless she has an I card and she has to cross the so-called weaponized barriers, the gates of these resident welfare organizations, the gates of these middle-income colonies. They are weaponized. In years that I was young, I did not see weaponized colonies. So there's a class threat there. I did not see weaponized colonies. I did not see security guards. I now see security guards with arms. So we must ask as to what's Dr. Ambedkar, you quoted, ma'am. Dr. Ambedkar had said that, maybe if you run away to the cities, you will escape the death jaws of caste. I'm not quoting him here. I mean, the similar thought. But have people escaped those claws of death? They haven't. By death, I mean caste discrimination here. They haven't. Or class discrimination. They haven't. So it's a vacuous kind of a situation as far as our cities are concerned. And that therefore brings up the other dimension that I wish to, and before I close, so is it so much silence? So people are just taking it lying down? So there's no action from those who are affected? Is it for us to cry here about the death rattles of gentrification? No, it is not, because that's where praxis comes in. So I don't see silence in cities. I see an active struggle in cities, and it's not me. Those of us who work on the ground, you will see birth cries, as I call them. Some have birthed, some are birthing. Birth cries of movements, birth cries of reclaim the city, birth cries of what some of the speakers spoke of right to the city, birth cries of occupations, occupying the city. I mean, end of the day, you have this financial speculation, and millions of houses probably in the country are just vacant. Probably, I don't have the data, but in Gurgaon, I see many houses vacant. And, for speculative purposes. So it will not be a long future where people will say, we will occupy these spaces. It has happened in certain cities. I have seen that happening in the city of Recife in Brazil. I'm not trying to advocate for anything, but people will occupy. That is why you see weapons coming up in middle-class colonies. There's a class fear of a huge type, unsaid, but reinforced by a number of our policies. So there are struggles are birthing. It is not incidental that the Occupy movements or the young people's momentums happened in our neighborhood. Of course, they might have gone wrong in the political ideological trajectory or not. It's for future to tell us. But many of them were urban centered, whether in Dhaka, whether in Colombo, or whether in Kathmandu, or whether in Nairobi. And they don't just come from a city question, they come from a national question, because the national question and the city question is not far removed. They are not two separate entities. It's the same sort of trajectory that we get to. The 74th Constitutional Amendment Act was referred to by Honorable Professor Dr. Satish Kumar. It's in precarity. I mean, of course, Kerala aside, and the Honorable Mayor of Bhubaneswar said they are flourishing the ward committees, but it's in huge precarity. I mean, 34 years, right? 1992 or 32 years or whatever, I forget. Yeah, three and some decades. It lies in shambles. It lies in precarity. If you see the municipal issues, the municipal questions, I think this evening's panel will speak to it, or some other panel tomorrow on governance is going to speak to it. But just to paraphrase it, the question of funds, the question of functions, and the question of functionaries. It's ailing on all those three fronts. So you do have the 12th schedule of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, which lays down a beautiful possibility to flourish. I mean, it's dying. So it's not just about reviving it, it's about flourishing it, because it also has silences in it. So it's not as if it's golden. It needs to be made revived for its goldenness, but also further sort of polished to become it more relevant. But it has those possibilities. Of the 18 subjects, there's the issue of, it is the function of the municipalities and the urban local governance to do slum improvement, to do poverty eradication, to do planning for urban commons. A number of those subjects are there. To plan for pollution, to sort of mitigate those aspects, to build resilient sort of possibilities for its people. There are many others. There are silences also. Those 18 subjects, and I haven't seen them talking of women in the city. The feminist ideas of what the city should look like, they're silent there. So perhaps it needs to be further embellished on many of those aspects. But it has those possibilities. And I think that's really the struggle that we are really talking of how to reclaim the city, of how to reclaim urban futures, of how to sort of build that democratic consensus, the social momentums, if I may call it, which really, the popular politics is shifting to urban. Many years ago, when I was working in Bangkok, we used to say, this is about a decade and more, we used to say, this Thailand politics is only determined by Bangkok. How Bangkok votes, one can say that for many other Latin American cities, because Latin America is most urbanized continent with upwards of 90% of urbanization. So we used to say that, Bangkok politics essentially boils down to Thailand politics essentially boils down to Bangkok politics. I see the same happening here. Maybe as we urbanize, that we can quibble about what's the level of urbanization. The economic survey of this year lays out conjunctures which tell us it's far more than is actually projected. I'll not get into that, Joseph Ji. But the fact remains that our politics is shifting urban, and that will create newer contestations, because our cities are and increasingly will be the spaces for humongous political, social contestations. And that is the historical moment we are in. It's a possibility to change discourse, not just of the cities, but change discourses of how our collective national futures could look like. Thank you so much. And before I say at this poll, there are a range of contributors who have co-designed it, who have developed it together, who have curated it, and who are, if I may say, manifesting it here. They are present here. I'll identify a few. Forgive me if I miss some. I begin with Tikender Panwarji right here, Ais Malhotra right here, our leader from MGU, Professor Matthew Verghese, Dr. Laksh Yog, Mr. Joseph Mathai, you heard him, you saw him. We have somewhere sitting behind Mr. Mukesh Verma. So also, of course, Dr. Esther Maria Selvam. And who else is there right now? Dr. Jayashri Kumar hidden there. Sorry, forgive me, I didn't see you at the back seat. So they are right here with you. So reach out to them for any support in the journey that this week-long friendship. Dr. Hamid Ansari was speaking, our ex-vice president, speaking the other day at your book launch. And he was saying, in a preamble, we have 4 constitutional values. The 4th one, justice, equality, or liberty, right? But the 4th one, the fraternity question, is perhaps the weakest. So we're looking at these fraternal spaces for co-learning, sharing, working together. For an actionaid, there's a hidden purpose. Praxis, yes, but praxis in a fraternal way. So we want to spend this week trying to develop that collective sense of protagonism. Thank you so much.
So, amongst most historians and amongst most social scientists, it's a kind of a axiomatic statement to say that people make their own history. People's protagonism exists. But there's also a caveat. They make their own history in the context they are in, within the popular imaginations of that time. They cannot make history beyond their context. And schools like this and the spaces like this are places where we can create those new imaginations, create popular imaginations of possible paths to the future. What Sulochana ji talked about, the Katha and the Vyatha. And the attempt over here is to try to bring those imaginations, excavate those imaginations and make them popular so that the people's protagonisms can move towards, just futures. Because as, in fact, it was Rosa Luxemburg who had said that there are 2 alternatives. There's either socialism or there's barbarism. And we should look for progressive futures. And that's what the attempt over here is. I thank this esteemed panel very much for all the inputs that they've given us. Thank you to the Vice Chancellor who had to leave because of his meeting. Thank you, Sulochana ji. Thank you, sir, for stepping in and giving us this lovely insight. Thank you, Esther ma'am. Thank you, Sandeep ji. And thank you all for giving us a patient listening. And that's it. We need to move into the next session. And I would request my colleagues to nice, please tea break after Professor Satish Kumar is here. Yeah. Okay. We go on to this session. Yeah. Yeah. Let's. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. I was thinking that, yeah. Okay, so thank you. And I think I would like to announce we would have loved to have tea right now, but it's not ready yet. So what we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute break and we start at 11 because I know. Yeah, so within 5 minutes, please be seated again in the hall because I am particularly very excited for Professor's session. I think you all are. So we start at. Hmm. Yes, we'll get those, but we'll take it after the session. December is over. Yeah, this is this. So we will take a 5 minutes break right now. We'll reassemble at 11, which is 10:54 right now with Professor Satish Kumar's session. And post that, we will start with tea. Thank you.
There is tea being served outside. Please go and help yourself to some and then come back within 5 minutes. Some snacks and water, lemonade, nimbu pani, so you can go out, get some, and then come back within 5 minutes, please. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are honored to have with us Professor M. Satish Kumar, who has very kindly agreed to deliver a special address. He's already been introduced, but I'd just like to share a bit more of his credentials with you before we begin. He is the Dean of Queen's University Belfast, Gift City Campus, Gandhinagar, Gujarat. He's a professor of global development and social transformation. He's a globally recognized interdisciplinary scholar and brings over 3 decades of academic and leadership experience across India, the United Kingdom, and international institutions with deep engagement in public policy, urban governance, and global development. He studied at Jawaharlal Nehru University, where he completed his master's, MPhil, and PhD. And Professor Kumar has held academic positions at leading institutions, including JNU and the University of Cambridge. He's been closely involved in shaping international academic collaborations and policy dialogues. He served as chairperson of the Kerala Urban Policy Commission from 2023 to 25, where he led the development of a long-term urban vision for the state, focusing on resilience, inclusivity, and collective local governance. His work spans urban studies, geography, development economics, and post-colonial studies. He's published extensively across disciplines. Professor Kumar is also a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society and the Higher Education Academy, and has been associated with global research policy institutions, including the UKRI Arts and Humanities Research Council. Widely sought by governments, international organizations, and ActionAid, he has delivered over 200 keynote lectures globally. His work continues to bridge academic research with policy and practice, with a strong emphasis on democratic, people-centered approaches to development and governance. Thank you so much, Professor Satish Kumar, for being with us. We will have the special address for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we will open the floor to participants for questions or any reflections that you may have. So I request you to please note down any questions that you can think of during Professor's address. Without further ado, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ais, for the generous introduction. As I said, most of you would have got a feel of what I'm going to speak today and of what I'm going to talk about, especially because of the fact that, as I said to you before, I have been teaching urban studies, urban development for almost 47 years. The Kerala Urban Policy Commission report was essentially a translation of all that I have experimented in the classroom to put it in the policy framework. So that's what I have been highly privileged and honored by the Kerala government to give me this opportunity to be able to translate what I've taught to my students and all the questions and answers that the students have given me to be able to put that in writing in that document. So I wish and I hope all of you would get an opportunity to look at it. So having spent almost, as I said, 27 years in Delhi, and then finishing and teaching there for 12 years in JNU. After that, of course, Delhi had gone through a lot of ups and downs, and those who are Delhi residents will recall, those of our generation, that a lot of things happened. A lot of things happened, and for me, having moved from Delhi, even after 1984, anti-Sikh riots and everything that happened thereafter, we were very much part and right in the middle of all of that, what's happening. Going to Cambridge, which was more secure, going to Belfast, which was more difficult. For those of you who don't know Belfast, Belfast is where the Game of Thrones was made and where the Titanic was built by the Irish and sunk by the British. So just for that, essentially to let you know where we stand as far as the Titanic is concerned. So coming from Belfast and really understanding the significance of people, the role of people and people's participation. So that's for me was really exciting. So as a preface to my talk, the title of my talk essentially is What's Right for the City or Right to the City? So this is based on a paper that I wrote looking at what's right for the city and what's right to the city. And how do you look at the play of right for the city and right to the city? And I'll basically run through a period of time very quickly, and I hope you'll be able to catch up things. And if you have any queries, we can always address that as we come along. So at the outset, let me give you a context that cities are human creations. Cities are human creations. Yeah, cities are human creations, places where we aspire to establish communities that can lead peaceful, prosperous, and free lives with full respect. For me, that was the definition that I designed for the report, that it is to establish communities who can lead peaceful lives, prosperous and free lives with full respect. And in that sense, Kerala is really unique in that respect, very unique because of the incredible success stories at the social level, the political level. So we can understand the significance of why cities matter. The other point is when we look at cities, and I give this definition to my students over many years, that urbanization is a directed concentration of population in urban space. The city itself becomes a narrative device for understanding the process of urbanization. So city itself talks to us. When we look at the city, city talks to us. रात में चले जाओगे शहर के अंदर तो वहां पे भी लोग बातें करते हैं. So you can really understand that city talks to each one of us. It depends whether we have the ability to listen to the city. जब शहर कहते हैं, when we say शहर, when we talk about city, inevitably we only look at the spokesperson who speaks on behalf of the city. But शहर भी बात करते हैं हमसे. So to really understand that city speaks to each one of us. And there is no universally applicable model of urban development. There's no one singular applicable model of urban development. It varies with the requirements of the community, its history, culture, and politics. So in that sense, because it varies according to its history, culture, and its priorities, urban is as much spatial as well as political. Okay? Urban is as much spatial as well as its political terrain. So if anyone says that urban is non-political, you're highly mistaken. Urban across the world has always been a political terrain. And that's where people basically fight for resources, struggle for resources. It's only when there is resources and when there is a demand for resources and when there's unequal distribution of resources, then people struggle for the resources. Okay, that's where it comes through. It's quite fascinating to see that as India becomes more and more urban, we recognize that that political terrain, that which is political, will become much more accentuated, much more obvious, much more magnified. So that is, in a sense, in a very simple way, to tell you that urban is fast changing. Urban is there for us to know that there's no change now. Urban is there to live for us. So let me just give you a quick insight into the cities. Most of you have seen cities in many ways. You can look at a city as an adult. You can look at a city from a child. When we were doing the Kerala Urban Policy Commission report, we managed to get children's perspectives. I was very conscious that we need to get child's perspective. A 5-year-old child has a very different perception of the city, which is different from an adult, which is different from a youth, which is different from a woman, which is different from a male. So recognizing that every stakeholder, every child has a perspective. So recognizing that perspective is very important for us. And for me, it matters how we design the city. It matters how we describe the city. It matters how we discuss the city. अगर आज हम बच्चों को लाएंगे यहाँ पे, if we bring small children here, they will have a completely different perception. Okay? Up till now, all planning, all policies have focused on the adult, on the migrants coming into the city. We haven't looked at the children's perspective. We are just learning to look at the women's perspective of the city very slowly. Okay, so again, these are images from when I said city is political, this is from my city in Belfast, where have gone through 50, 60 years of conflict, and the people were able to reclaim areas of conflict by designing murals. Earlier, there were murals here, which was only showing guns and don't come to this territory. It was highly territorialized. And when people realized the importance of peace, they transformed those murals and left these beautiful images of peace and people. Okay, so just giving you perspectives of how an inner city transformation took place over a period of time. So we can learn a lot about the city through its murals. When you travel to Barcelona, when you travel to any other city in the world, please look for murals. Make a special tour, and you'll find that you'll learn a lot about the city. It's like when I tell my friends that when you're in JNU, when you look at the murals in JNU, you learn a lot about the city. So there were times when those were documented as well. So just give me a quick insight about this data here. And I want to highlight some portions of the data why it matters. So let's look at the distribution of annual growth of data. And as I said, this is my teacher. This is who I am, and as an academic, I want to show some figures here. So let me look at the fact that if you look at the annual growth 2000, 2010, 20, 30, 40, and 50, I just want to look at South and Central Asia, because this is where you are. South and Central Asia, annual growth is 2.51, 2.72, 2.7, 2.22, 1.89 by 2050. So 1.89 by 2050 is quite significant, because why is it 1.89? Why is suddenly the annual growth has gone down to 1.89? Anyone in the room here would like to answer that question? What is the reason for that decline in annual growth of urban population? Projected urban population. Anyone like to hazard an answer? Anyone? Just speak up. Don't worry. Even if you are, yes. That's right. So it's the demographic transition. It's the demographic transition that Kerala has already faced. It's the declining of fertility and birth rates. And that's where you'll find that that's reflected in the point that there is 1.89 annual growth rate. But you can see, even as we reach 2030, it's still very high, 2.32 annual growth. Let's look at the sub-Saharan Africa, 3.7, 3.48, 3.21, 2.85, 2.4. Sub-Saharan Africa will be absorbing more of the urban. So more cities, more urban population will be found in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so that is very important to recognize. If you look at the developing countries, rich and developed countries, land-rich developed countries, 1.36, 1.13, 0.91, 0.73, and 0.59, pretty much non-existent. They will not be building any more cities, but it is quite significant to recognize that in the areas like Europe and Japan is minus 0.04. Okay, but if you look at the developing world together, 1.34, all developed world 0.21. So there is power. There is power in being urban. There is power in being urban because you realize that urban connotates a lot of resources. Urban connotates a lot of strength, a lot of investment. So again, something which I taught to my students for many years is that historically, after colonialism, after colonization, after independence of India, 1970, most of the urban agglomerations you find were in coastal cities. So if you look at the red dots, and the green dots were very scattered. Most big urban agglomerations was in these sites, okay, 1970. If you go to 2011, you see the proliferation, significant. There is inland explosion. So agar hamare shahar dekhenge, most explosion is now happening inland. Port cities have disappeared. Okay, there are there, but they are mostly, there are very few areas like Mumbai, Singapore, etc. You'll find that still maintaining a huge balance, and they will continue. But bulk of the transformation is happening in the inland cities across the world, across all parts of the world. And this is happening because of transportation revolution. Really, transportation is transforming the way people start living in cities. So areas which nobody thought a city will come up, like I am coming from Gandhinagar, and I know Sabakuttan is here. Gandhinagar was just a small field. And he who lived there would know that practically nothing existed. Today, it's a sprawling metropolis coming in there. And that is true across whole of UP and whole of other regions of India. So again, one quick point. If you look at the growth between 2025, if you look at the natural increase, the difference between birth rates and death rates, migration and reclassification, which causes urban change, you'll find it between, if you look at the less developed regions, 45, 55, 50, 50, 54, 46. So Again, migration and reclassification are also bumping up the urban numbers. And in the next census of India, you'll find that there will be more cities which will emerge because the numbers pretty much would have multiplied by now. So Kerala's projected population, urban population by 2030 is estimated to be about 87%. Huge jump from where we are today. And that will be true of other cities, other states as well. Just to give you a context. So if you look at the urban India projections, it's saying that 1.2 trillion capital investment is necessary to meet projected demand in Indian cities, 1.2 trillion. 700 to 900 million square meters of commercial residential spaces needs to be built. A new Chicago has to be built every year. Okay, think about it. A new Chicago has to be built every year to accommodate people of India, urban people of India. If you look at the whole 2.5 billion square meters of roads have to be paved, 20 times the capacity added in the past decade. So Nitin Gadkari with best intentions to meet this target is challenging to meet that target. So 7,400 kilometers of metros, subways will be needed to be constructed, 20 times the capacity added in the past decade. So this is the urban reality. This is the urban reality. While we like our metros, while we like the interconnectivity, we have so much of increase in air traffic now. The challenge that we have today is as the working age, as population increases, 590 million people will live in cities, nearly twice the population of the United States. Okay, that is the reality. So how do you plan for an urban future? What do you understand by collective local governance when we look at these figures and facts? And that's something I would like to spend a few minutes to talk about. Is that okay? Any questions still here? Okay, so let's move very quickly then to look at some clusters very quickly. So these are the emerging clusters. So we have the Delhi, Chandigarh cluster, we have the Delhi, Chandigarh, Jaipur clusters, we have the Ahmedabad, Surat, Vadodara cluster, we have the Kolkata, Nagpur cluster. So all of these clusters is a reality. Urbanization is happening through clusters. So you can see that each of those clusters will require different forms of investment, will require different forms of interconnectivity between cities, across cities. So Bangalore, Chennai, again, you have that. So within Kochi, Bangalore, and all of the connectivity to Chennai as well, how those clusters are emerging. So let me move very quickly to the economic cluster. Northeast, yeah. So Northeast at the moment is still developing, but it'll come because now the infrastructure is already in place. So it will happen definitely. But as I said, this is slightly dated in terms of where the clusters are, but these clusters will only increase. If you look at Kerala, and I just, based on our study recently, almost all of the different clusters that have emerged, let me give you a quick idea. So clusters, first cluster, which I highlight, is the Kannur Kasaragod cluster. We have the Kozhikode, Malappuram cluster. We have the Thrissur Ernakulam cluster. We have the Kottayam, Alappuzha, and Pathanamthitta cluster. We also have the Kollam, Thiruvananthapuram cluster. So, and Palakkad, again, part of the cluster. So clusters are very important, and clusters are emerging because of the resources that are there, because of the people who live there. So urban change, urbanization is going to be triggered, motivated, fostered by these clusters. People will concentrate in those clusters because that's where the livelihood is, and that's where the opportunities, educational, health, all these opportunities will come. Is that okay? Thank you. Again, just in terms of the projected figures for Kerala, urban, and because I'm in Kerala, I wanted to just tell you what the projections are. By 2031, what you observe is a gradual shift of urban agglomeration from coastal areas northward. Northward shift is going to happen, and people ask the question, why northward? Why is it everything shifting to the north? Because there is more space in the north to build more cities. There's no space in the south. There's no space in the southern part of Kerala to build more cities. We have become already concentrated, saturated. Okay, so it's the shift northward that we are going to be observing by 2030. Those who are going to be planners, etc., something to consider. So 2051, you can see is deeply embedded. as far as this is concerned. Very much deep corridors, urban corridors coming up, essentially, not an economic corridor, urban corridor. Okay, so in terms of sustainable cities, and that's what I wanted to also emphasize, the Sustainable Cities and Communities, Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General of the United States, noted that cities are where the battle for sustainable development will be won or lost. So where do we stand? How do we stand? What is sustainable cities? In 1950s, the world was predominantly rural, as a global urbanization level was 30%. By 2050, the scenario is projected to reverse as urbanization is expected to reach 70%. So 70% of the people will be living in cities by 2030. Okay? And again, when we look at the scenario across the regions, the overarching aim of Sustainable Development Goal 11 is to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. That's a mandate for the moment as a global mandate. So I want to start by Kautilya because I wanted to bring in a perspective about the city. When I talk about the right to the city, what is right for the city or right to the city? Okay, and this is something which I wanted to highlight because, as I said, I've been working in this field for many years. I looked at it. Before I talk about Kautilya and Arthashastra, I want to ask you a simple question. What is it that is most valuable for you as an individual? We have heard Esther talk about the rights of the Dalits and others. So what is most valuable as an urban citizen? What is it that you value most? Come again? Respect and dignity. Time. Anything else? Equality, justice, right? The most significant, and I'm going to just turn this, and it links to what all you say. The most significant aspect of a person living in modern India is sovereignty. What Rousseau said in 1762, we are all born free, but we are all in chains. Okay? So the idea that sovereignty is the theme of my presentation today. What I've given you is a context. Sovereignty is a theme. And let me show you what that sovereignty meant in Kautilya's Arthashastra of 300 BCE. So Kautilya's Arthashastra provided a key insight into the settlement history of Indian subcontinent. It presented us with perspectives related to urban planning, rural-urban relationships, and spatial organization of early Indian city-states. The central message of Arthashastra is that sovereignty overrides all aspects of existence. Okay? In his treatise, everyone and every aspect of life are part of sovereignty. So when we think about it, what happened to that sovereignty? We were born with that sovereignty. Where did we lose that sovereignty? Okay? And that's a question I want you to keep in the back of your mind. And Arthashastra, he says, basically, he makes that statement there. The king, the minister, the country. The king, the minister, the country, the fort, the treasury, the army, and the friend and the enemy are elements of sovereignty. All are elements of sovereignty. Okay? Here, Samrajya and Rajniti are deeply imbricated in this scheme. So when we look at the incredible manuscript of 300 BCE, the document provides a rare insight into the nature of Indian city-states. The traditional architectural images highlights the form and function of the cities, the relationship between town and country. And the evaluation that very much before the advent of the 74th Amendment of the Indian Constitution in 1992, the evaluation of resources in the city. So all this was discussed 300 BCE, all about how do you manage resources in the city. So when I was studying and when I was looking at it, I was absolutely amazed. The suggestions that it talked about the central place theory. The central place theory that everyone talked about in the context of India. So that central place theory, which is provided by Western scholars. So Arthashastra already had the central place theory. Let me give you examples. There shall be set up a sthania, fortress of that name. That's okay. Is it moving? Wait 1 second. So let me just explain while he does that. So there shall be a stani, a fortress in the name, in the center of 800 villages, a Dronemukha in the center of 100 villages, a Karvatika in the center of 200 villages, and a Sanghara in the midst of 10 villages. So in a way, there was a very clear definition, spatial definition of how many villages will make a city. Okay, and it's fascinating to see that framework. But what we observe is that there was a conduct of town dwellers and of the government of Sashan, what the Sashan should be. The countryside was perceived as a resource base with its own functions and traditions. It was from here that the wealth and power was derived, an area to be governed and taxed. Life in the city was governed with a series of bylaws aimed at achieving an orderly urbane existence. For instance, pollution of the streets, tanks, temples, or places of pilgrimage was punished by large fines. Much before Swachh Bharat Abhiyan came into existence today, there were strict fire precautions, and thousands of vessels were kept at strategic points in the city to prevent fire and destruction. Strangers could be accommodated in the city. However, their presence had to be registered with the city officials, yet another precursor to the foreign regional registration office. So it's quite interesting how all of these policies, laws were embedded deeply in the ancient history of Indian society. At the same time, and this is quite interesting, unauthorized squatting or emergence of slum in the city was forbidden. A key point in Arthashastra was the emphasis of good citizenship, of civic virtues. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We have talked about that. So there we come to the end of that Arthashastra business, but let me explain it. So the emphasis was on good citizenship, of civic virtues, and any deviance was reported to the king for action. The question for us today is how and why did this orderly urban existence descended into informality and chaos country scene? The demise of good citizenship and intrusion of informality in urban spaces can be directly attributed to the colonial imposition on the subcontinent. And that's what happened. With the advent of colonialism, all the previous ideas of civic virtues, of citizenship, of good citizenship, completely got destroyed, dismantled, and the division between groups emerged. Okay, so it's interesting to see that advent of colonialism literally transformed the urban space and the rural spaces of India. And it's been well documented and many researches now. Just giving you some images of Fort St. George in Madras, how things transformed in Madras itself. The division between black towns and white towns that came into existence completely transformed the whole idea of civic virtues and urban citizenship. So there was, within the colonial urban space, it was a civilizing project. It was a civilizing project which included moral ordering of citizens. It was a civilizing project in charge of spatial or municipal ordering. So everyone had to adhere to municipal laws and bylaws. There was also sanitization or social and cultural ordering. So in a way, what it did was to put people in different boxes. Okay, when there was a plague, when there was a cholera, like when we had COVID, we found that people were automatically corralled into areas, spaces that they could not. Quarantine became part of the social and cultural ordering. So this was part of that historical journey that we have observed. So the European model, and I'll come to the European model. So what we observe is quite fascinating, that how, when we look at the whole city itself, urban city today, when we look at the framework of urbanity, we find that there has been an increase in informality. We talked about informal sector in urban centers. The informality increased many folds. We saw that in Charles Dickens' description that my colleague has already mentioned. But we also see that in the context of India at the same period. So we find that levels of informality multiplied. in the context of urban India, which tend to undermine rational planning for cities. Land use management has created a plethora of unsavory practices by private speculators who vie for public management and individual entrepreneurs. So according to Gertner, almost all of Delhi violates planning and building laws at all times, thereby enabling unauthorized settlements within the national capital region. This violation is also transposed across fragile ecological zones across the riverine belt of Yamuna. Okay. Successive governments have provided amnesty for this purposive violation of urban and rural spaces. And this is directly the outcome of democratization of urban spaces in India and goes against the very principles highlighted by the Arthashastra, the and Mansara and Shilpa Shastra. Informality, which is at once disembodied, usurps the ideals of sovereignty and power and legitimizes rent-seeking, violating city planning principles. There is a collusion across diverse stakeholders which makes a mockery of that which is legitimate and legal. Such a dissonance is articulated when we consider how governance is prescribed by our master plans and how governance is finally inscribed by such informality. So we find that governance itself has pluses and minuses. And we have to be very careful when we say urban governance, what it really means. On paper, on planning paper, it means one thing. When it is manifested on the ground, it means completely different. And we are continuously making adjustments for that. So that's one thing which is very important to understand. So there is a need, there's a demand for insurgent citizenship. The demand for insurgent citizenship, which Neil Smith, my good old friend, used to talk about the revanchist city, where exclusionary versions of civil society needed to be overturned. This resonates with the idea that prosperity should be for all together. Such an idea can only be realized by strengthening the role of sovereignty of civil society, not just endure changes via governance and regulations, but to ensure the sustainability of policies and programs in urban India. Urban India seeks a quality of life that cuts across all divides. However, we must remember that we cannot sweep the symptoms of poverty and homelessness out of sight under pressure from city managers and elite urbanites and business leaders. So moving into the 21st century, we can see much more complexities being introduced into this largely urban century. So there is, as I said, when we look at the largely urban century, there's a huge challenge that we are facing. The challenge of top-down policies, top-down instructions coming into the cities, into the urban spaces, top-down urban policy intrusions, which are met by bottom-up resistances. And globally, we find that bottom-up resistances, civic resistances, looking for alternative visions. So when I talk about civic society, civic is very different from civil society. Okay, so we need to make a clear distinction between what is civic and what is civil. And we should not take it interchangeably as much as possible. So when we see the alternative visions, it is really important that urban spaces are held to account for successful deliberation and successful deliberation of this new change in a globalized new liberal era. So when we look at the European versus Indian cities, and we have the models, and this is where we want to take a few minutes there in the debates, European cities have become synonymous with Barcelona model, with Copenhagen model, with Amsterdam, the just city, exemplars of urban excellence. So I ask the question, can we think of cities in India that have become exemplars for India? Do we have any city in India which becomes an exemplar, just like the European cities have become? And that is a challenge that we need to address as students of urban studies, but also for all of us to think about. But before we move forward, let's consider what is a European city? This is taken to describe a socially equitable form of urban society. It highlights good public transport, high density living, balanced social structure, progressive policy towards redistribution of wealth. Such a city is in key contrast to the great American cities, denoting significant class-based segregation and sprawl. With globalization and increased neoliberal intervention policies, urban governance is increasingly being steered towards making cities relevant to the elusive global capital. And that is what we are faced with. How do you become relevant? How do your cities become relevant? How do Noida become relevant to global capital? And those are the challenges we are facing in terms of our relevance. So increasingly being steered towards attracting global capital. Making city attractive is closely linked to the idea of placemaking, where urban design is marshaled to facilitate increased consumption. A European model, therefore, is tagged as being entrepreneurial in form and function. It is efficient and equitable urban space for all, being dignified, harmonious, and a middle-class ideal. So here is the point, that we all aspire to become middle class. And urban is urban middle class. And that's what sabka saath, sabka vikas, we all have to have the same purchasing power capacity. How far is that realistic? How much time will it take to reach the urban middle class ideal? That's a point I'm just not going to elaborate. I'm just going to touch there. So again, the idea of placemaking becomes quite important. How placemaking and urban design fostering an urban civic realm, urban civic society. It's crucial to keep in mind. So role of governance. Role of governance is again very important. Governing urbanism is an arrangement of governing beyond the state. So people living in the cities also govern themselves. Each of the people in the society, in urban societies, also govern themselves, whether we like it or not. Okay? So there is an invisible hand which forces us to adhere to the norms of our society. So I'm in Gandhinagar in Gujarat, and I know that if I'm meeting up, when I go looking for a house in the initial stages, they said, if you're not part of a Jain community, you cannot live here. Okay, if you're not a Gujarati, you cannot live here. So there is already self-governance in place in societies. And you find that right across India as well, and right across the world, governance is there. So role of partnership is really crucial, understanding the significance of partnership. So as we move forward, we ask this question, the critical awareness of complexities of Indian cities will become increasingly normalized. So when we see urban today, are we normalizing our urban life? Is city life becoming normalized? And that is a big question. Are we doing anything to stop normalization of city life? We find the serial reproduction of malls. The same mall in DLF, you'll find in Bangalore. And if they have space, they will create more malls and more malls. And everyone believes that the property prices increases because there's another mall around you. Go to Gurgaon, you'll see more malls. And I'm giving examples that malls have become a social sort of a tagline, that we have a great mall, I will be able to come there. But almost all malls look the same. Okay, they're not producing anything different. So what we are finding is complete normal serialization of these malls becoming in existence. So the critical ethos of sovereignty, of rights and duties and citizenship, of responsible citizenship becomes really important to recognize. So governing, as I said, governing urbanism is not that easy. Informality is legitimized to allow a modicum of accidental and discursive flexibility. So we find that, the site and services for the slums in India, the site and services approach, that's mostly normalizing, again, those slums and those areas, particularly which are having people with low income groups, Dalits, etc. They get normalized too. And we ask the question, how is their life improving? How are their lives improving with all the change that we talk about, all the progress we talk about? Okay. So again, looking at the jhugis, jhoparis, and chawls, we realize that informality has emerged as a byproduct of formal planning, instruments in city. This has more to do with the ruptures witnessed in formalized planning machinery, particularly unplanned spatial incursions, which have emerged in time. So collective rights of Aam Aadmi is very important, can only be empowered by recognizing and reinforcing the civic citizenship in a city. And as I said, civic citizenship reinforces sovereignty. Without civic citizenship, we cannot reinforce sovereignty. Thus, urban policymaking is highly politicized and challenging in the best of circumstances. So partnership was historically organized through civil society, was never civic based. All partnership was never civic based. It was always civil society based. And I'm asking for a change back to the civic society. So while we are looking at all of these different frameworks, perspectives, the contestation in Indian cities is who is included and who's excluded. The question that you ask is who is included and who is excluded? What are the mechanisms for accountability, legitimacy, and representation? Okay, and those are key questions that we need to ask. Since 1991, there has been a dominant shift from egalitarian policies towards increased utilitarianism in urban policies. And we've seen that even at the run-up to the 2010 Commonwealth Games, where beautification of the city image also resulted in redesigning the city infrastructure. So we expect that as we have more flyovers, metros, etc., that there will be some form of solidarity. There will be an infrastructural solidarity. There is an assumption that there will be an infrastructural solidarity. What we observe in reality is that there are many people who have never traveled on a metro because they cannot afford a metro. Unke liye rickshaw hi chalega, ya bus chalega. Okay, so this idea of infrastructural solidarity gets completely dismantled when we look at the access to all of the infrastructure. And we've seen that examples in Bogota, in Medellin City. We've seen exactly how they built this most beautiful mass transit system, but many people could not afford to get into and they avoided, even the transit system avoided the poor areas of the city. Okay, so how do we avoid making the same mistakes in our own city? And infrastructure solidarity questions are going to emerge more and more. Look at Gurgaon. That's a good example of how that city itself becomes completely unusable during monsoons. So infrastructural solidarity is definitely one of the issues. And there's a huge amount of romanticization of grassroots urban movements. It has run its own steam. But I wanted to emphasize that effective governance and citizenship, there's a need for effective governance and citizenship. It's only possible by reinforcing or reintroducing the critical civic society. Such a civic society would cut across middle-class divide, going beyond simplistic bourgeois and non-bourgeois city, as reported by Gertner. A state-engineered urban enterprises are strategically aligned to corporate agendas and endorsed by middle-class sensibilities in the city. Currently, there is a normalization of urban aspirations in India across class, religious, and ethnic lines. Citizens desire to live in the city. Urban symbolism is a status enhancer and a source of power for urban citizens. Okay. Contestations, we look at the metrification of cities, I just mentioned, effective governance, civic society engagement will lead to stronger and effective plans for the city. Civic society engagement and stronger effective plans will lead to higher rates of implementation of proposals made in the plans. The choices that planners make about civic engagement will affect the degree to which stakeholders participate in making urban plans. So there is, in terms of governance in urban India, there's a political deficit, avoiding pitfalls from the urban European experiences. And that's one of the big challenges. How do you combine, how do you square, how do you bring and reflect on the political deficit, the democratic deficit? How do you look at it? Many areas people are disengaged. Even in our Urban Policy Commission work, we found, and I think Tikendra will talk about it, there were very strong evidence that there were many people who disengaged with what was happening in ULBs at the grassroots level. And that disengagement is part of the political deficit as much as, and we heard Esther talk about that today as well. So it's one of the big challenges when you consider the challenges of governance of cities. The principles of sustainability, the principles of subsidiarity. That means how close do you make policy decisions? How close do you take it to the people? If you are able to take the people together in making policy decisions, then subsidiarity principles are adhered to. Most times we see that policy decisions are made by bureaucrats and people have no say in those decision making. So few points there. I think I'm going to just jump across and sustainable goals. So the idea of inclusion is very important. I want to talk towards the end. How much time do I have? Just give me another 5 minutes. Yeah. So I'm just going to very quickly run through the imperatives of looking at the urban politics and how urban politics have emerged in the course of time. Urban politics, really almost all writings in urban theory differ in how they conceptualize urban development. There's a refashioning of what it means to be urban. And we just heard what it means to be urban. What do you think what means to be urban? There's a refashioning of that term today. So within the context of what is there's a refashioning, we see almost all brownfields, greenfields are being converted into cities. Brownfields and greenfields are being transformed into this high-end cities. And we have seen examples in Canary Wharf in the UK and others. So what lies behind these trends is the new urban politics. The new urban politics is focused particularly on the projects orchestrated by state-led coalitions and special purpose SPVs. So SPVs, state-led coalitions, are promoting a new liberal agenda, which is not unique to India. It is across all countries of the world. So the current urban scenario is this new coalition, the state-led coalitions, SPVs, whose aim is to boost urban economies amid quicksilver globalizing capitalism. And that is the reality. So when we look at the conflict in the Middle East, it's all about the global capitalism, which was already addressed, mentioned in the morning's presentation. But just to reiterate the point that neoliberal urbanism is here to stay. Is there a challenge to that? We don't have a space to challenge it. It's part and parcel of our daily life. As I said, everyone wants to have their own car. They don't want to travel in a bus. Bus is not air conditioned. I don't want the bus. Even in Delhi, after the DTC has gone into the green, the blue line and everything else, and now you have the air conditioned bus, look at the usage. It's quite fascinating to see that. So new urban politics deals with the rise of urban privatism. It's public entrepreneurialism at its best. We find growth machines every place. The ideas of a growth machine, local economic development becomes a growth machine. So my question is, can new urban politics keep pace with the tectonic shifts occurring in the process and practice of everyday urban politics? So everyday urban politics is changing, and it will change more and more as people become educated, as people become experienced living in those sites. So the idea of an entrepreneurial paradigm, neutralizing dissenting voices viewed to be mandatory for a properly political urban landscape. So even dissenting voices are not accepted. And if you look at this functionality of urban bodies, we have an NDMC on one side, MCD on another side. We have multiple urban bodies without any perspective. Okay. So again, you find, and I just wanted to reiterate what Ananya Roy said, the 21st century metropolis is a chameleon. It shifts shape and size. Margins become centers. Centers become frontiers. And regions become cities. The 21st century metropolis makes a full of census jurisdictions. The mappings of city and suburbs, the easy narrative co-founds the easy narratives of regional change. So that is what we are living with. Everything is changeable. Nothing is constant. So the politics of redistribution, the politics of redistribution thus becomes unpolitics. Right to the city falling in the hands of private and quasi-private interest. This right is ascribed to small coterie of political and economic elites who are in a position to shape cities more and more after their own desires. The 1980s also saw the evolution of city politics in time. But what is important is the rise of urban privatism. As David Harvey summarized, these events most eloquently as a generic shift from urban managerialism to urban entrepreneurialism. So we see the rise of this urban entrepreneurial class. If you look at the number of millionaires in India, how many millionaires of India in the wealth books? The global millionaires have increased. China is number one. India is rising very rapidly. So when we become the fourth largest economy in the world, obviously the number of millionaires and billionaires are going up in the, so they are all entrepreneurial. So urban entrepreneurialism is the shift. We are no longer here to manage a city. We don't need management of cities. We need to become entrepreneurial. And that is the ethos of our Viksit Bharat today, to make sure that every person contributes to the entrepreneurial idea of urban living. Okay, I don't want to go there. I'm just going to run through it very quickly. Yeah, the most important, I saw this image when I was traveling to Bangalore airport, and I thought I'd just share this. Look at this image here, just to draw, and those of you are sitting in the back, I'll just repeat. In the skies, beneath the oceans, in outer space, in the skies, beneath the oceans, and in outer space, and 54 countries, Wipro is at work at the next big idea. In the skies, beneath the oceans, and outer space, and 54 countries, Wipro is at work in the next big idea. So they're going to mine. So we are mining everything that we can beneath the ocean, in the skies, at every level. Okay, this is where we are today. And if you want to be part of this, you have to be part of this. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. That's what the message is very clear. So we find that there is essentially quite interesting that how the framework of growth, how the idea of growth has become so deeply embedded in every child's psyche. Every parent who comes to my university in Gandhinagar, in Queen's University in Gandhinagar, the first question he asks me is, what is the ROI? What is the return on investment for my child coming to my university? You ask the question. हमारे ज़माने में तो कोई नहीं पूछता था, भाई आपके ROI क्या होता था? हम तो कॉलेज में गए हैं. But this is the reality. So we can see that, you can't change it. It's part and parcel of our urban identity, who we are. So just also, this whole new urban politics has also led to spatially selective criminalization of the poor. And this is something which we observe, and Bhaviskar and others have mentioned it, accumulation by dispossession, that you accumulate by dispossession. And this is happening on a regular level, at a global level, at the national level. We also see that in 21st urban political landscape, the existence of hegemony among elites of landscape as aesthetics over compassion of the poor. So really speaking, the change is quite significant, what we observe. And let me end by showing some interesting facts here. This is global facts. The traditional left and right politics is displaced by a neutral business-like coalition. It's a neutrality that we have lost our sovereignty. It's a neutrality. I come to the end. I started with sovereignty. I want to come back. It's this neutrality which has ended. And we can see both are displaced by neutral business-like coalition. Master planned urban development is challenged by unauthorized development in the name of inter-urban competition. We see that in Bangalore. We see that in Chennai, everywhere. In Delhi, of course, you see that. As Minton says, land or property, which has been in public hands for 150 years is moving back into private hands. This is the reality. Okay? The urban reality today. As Dreher notes, as urban problems spread to thousands of suburbs, it will be more difficult to blame the lazy urban poor people or incompetent corrupt city governments for these problems. Better off suburbs will discover that they cannot fix traffic gridlocks, as in Bangalore, long commutes, as in Delhi and Gurgaon, environmental degradation, or skyrocketing housing costs without simultaneously addressing the interrelated problems of inner suburbs and central cities. What's next? I want to leave you thinking about what's next with the Bandar I met in the Sundarbans, who gave me a long, big lesson. When he was looking up in the thing, I said, what's next for us? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really, Professor Satish Kumar, that was, you gave us a lot to think of. Thank you so much for contextualizing it through the Arthashastra and leaving us with a lot of questions. As you rightly said, like our cities today are becoming sites of brutal accumulation. There is a strong political deficit, there's strong disengagement. I've been standing for a while. Thank you. I'll pass you the cordless mic. But yeah, so like you said, like the World Inequality Report of 2026 showed that at least in India, the richest 1% hold 40% of the total wealth, and the bottom 50% survive on just 1%. So when you're talking about this sovereignty or participation or city, the aspirations that govern the creation of a city, we're seeing that this sovereignty is lost out on a daily basis by multiple communities just for some material benefit. There's a daily loss of sovereignty just for some minute material benefits that come through participating in, say, undignified livelihoods, unsafe livelihoods which have no jobs. I mean, there is no job security, there is no minimum wage is hardly given. And what is minimum wage? We should be calling for decent wage, right? So a lot to think about. Then when you talk about master plans, we've also been seeing a trend in a lot of Indian cities where a lot of this is being given up to like consultants. And who are these consultants? That the Deloittes, KPMGs, and the big fours of the world that are actually planning, right? It's sad that these are the players that are governing these processes. So yeah, I think infrastructural solidarity I found particularly interesting, and it really ignores the threat, the desire, the existing threat of these desires of upward mobility, which should not be ignored, right? They should be taken into consideration, and there should be some form of social nudges that kind of make this infrastructure more acceptable, more appealing to the increasingly large and swelling middle classes, as you showed us the numbers that will be entering the urban space and the increased middle class. So really, thank you for that extremely rich presentation. We hope you can send it to us so that we can share it amongst the participants as well. And with that, please, any questions, any reflections, if you could raise your hand.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go to you, then we'll go to Dr. Aruna, and then that's it. Yeah. Okay. Three.
Yes,
We're taking 3 questions. One. Okay. There's one in the audience already.
Yes.
Yeah, after Kate.
Yeah, hello, Professor. It was a good presentation. My name is Guru Saravanan from Institute of Grassroots Governance. I have a question related to the urban governance that you spoke about. Basically, from our field experience, what we see is that there is this growth of peri-urban villages and how they want to be governed. So in our field experience, what happens is that there are some peri-urban villages. They want to be governed by the existing rural governance framework. But, like you mentioned, the government stakeholders and the agencies, the World Bank, and then, like the other, the non-state actors I am talking about, they want these peri-urban villages to come under the, urban governance mechanism. So there is a sort of like it's a difficult scenario where people like from the marginalized, they don't have a say. Do I need to be governed under the rural governance framework, or do I need to be governed? So I just wanted to hear more from your experience on how this growth of peri-urban villages is affecting the existing urban governance framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I answer that and then pick it up? So thanks for that question, because that's a very important question. We faced that when I was working on the Kerala Urban Policy Commission, because as you know, Kerala has the rural-urban continuum. So here's something which I asked, and you'll be surprised with the answer. So when we said that we know that there are many census towns, more than 400 census towns. Now, if you were to declare, and this is slightly answering slightly differently, but I'll come back to the main question. So when we asked this person that if we were to convert all of these census towns into urban centers, census towns to be declared fully urban, would you like to happen? And the Panchayati head said no. I said, why? And you know the answers. It's very interesting, the answer, because that's a fact. He said to me, and this is quoting my own colleagues as well, he said to me that really the challenge is that if I declare myself urban, so I get money from the forest department, I get money from the Manrega, okay, which is now a different title. I get all these various things. If you add all of them, I get a lot of money to take care of my constituency. If I declare everything urban, wo khatam ho jayega. Okay, so there is already that aspect of how do you manage your day-to-day living. So that's one part of it. when you look at the peri-urban point, it's a very crucial point. Peri-urban is one of the most critical areas of urban change. It's neither urban nor rural. It's an in-between spaces. When my grandmother was living in Kannur, I'm a non-resident in Kerala. I'm born somewhere else. I remember coming home and there was a huge debate. Will the municipality voter reach the house? Okay. So my old traditional house is in between space. It's neither in the panchayat nor in the town. Okay. So if you are waiting for the pipe clean water to come to your house, the point is that will only come up to the road, which is under municipality. So a pensioner who is living there, she says, why should I pay to bring the pipe from that road to my house? It's a big question. And these are on the ground reality that peri-urban spaces usually get left out in legislations. They are like third cousin, fourth cousin. We don't care about them. So effectively, you don't care about them because peri-urbans, what do we care? So if you look at the whole, globally, if you look at crime statistics, health statistics, it's the poorest in the peri-urban region. So those peri-urban regions, if they're declared to be urban, they become tier 3, tier 4 small towns. Okay, and again, they need a lot of investment to be able to meet their aspirations. During COVID also, and I think even before COVID, some of the most deadly outbreaks, health outbreaks, Zika and other viruses came out of the peri-urban regions in China, which was not governed by anybody. It was no man's land, NML I call them. So at some level, it is good to incorporate them, but at the same time, making sure that they have all the infrastructure, facilities, policies in place for the benefit of the citizens. Otherwise, nobody cares about them. Thank you.
Hi, very fascinating presentation and discussion. So I have a couple of comments and one question.
Sure.
So much of it, I'm kind of reflecting because I operate in urban health. I play, my lenses are public health. So I'm kind of looking at it as a corollary of urban systems and health systems. So like in health systems, we say that we shouldn't wait for a pandemic or an epidemic to happen to kind of rectify. Similarly, these urban systems that we're discussing, like cities after cities, we're trying to kind of ape the West, or perhaps not looking at the current context to kind of look at it. So that still remains a question. Of course, we don't have an answer, but perhaps we have to reflect as we go back home and engage in our work. The second part, I really like the way you brought that contemporariness of market in our discourses. Fine, we understand, like now everything is like, what do I get? So the investment in real estate and how we are looking through that lens of developing a city. But then, I mean, that remains kind of a trend. But then comes my question here. How do we position the role of the state? Because essentially, city, the space, everything, there's a right to the citizen, right to health, right to everything kind of interwoven. So how do you position, or how would you like to discuss the role of state here? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's again a great question. Thanks for that observation as well. So when we look at the state, that's why I started with sovereignty. Within the Constitution, we are guaranteed liberty, everything else, equality, liberty, etc. Sovereignty, at some point, we take it for granted. Sovereignty by the Republic. Everyone is a sovereign individual within the Republic. And that's very clearly enshrined in our Constitution. So state guarantees those principles, those directive principles, but also guarantees sovereignty. So my question is, where did we lose track of sovereignty? Why did we lose track of sovereignty? We saw how sovereignty itself was not in the conversation during COVID, when millions of people had to go back to the villages because they were not given any support. Even within the most prosperous and progressive housing societies in Bangalore and others, they were absolutely brutal in terms of people coming inside. So we know that. We know that. So the role of the state, I always say that the state has a huge capacity much more than an individual capacity. So to be able to manage, to be able to work with that state, which has huge capacity, to be able to adjust. And I think that's where the balance between legislation, judiciary, and the executive becomes very important. It's a very fine balance. It can go either way. And we've seen examples globally where when the balance is not right, it becomes huge problematic. So any change, any progressive change will have to come through the state. The state is answerable to the people. The executive is answerable to the people. The judiciary is not always answerable to the people, but the executive is. And we've seen many instances in the context of India where at every election, the people have to go back and establish that trust about sovereignty, that you are an individual, a sovereign, to come and vote for my party. And every party asks the question. So I think that for me, state plays a big role. But that's why I start with Arthashastra. Because ultimately, when you look at it, they did not invent anything new. We lost the whole perspective of the civic sense. And basically today, when you say civic, if people automatically use civil society as civic, it's completely different. And we have lost track of the civicness, civic identity of an individual, the sovereignty of an individual. And state has a big role to reinforce that.
There are a few hands for questions, but I'm afraid we have less time, so we'll take two more questions. Professor, would you be all right taking both of them together, and then we'll close with your answer? So one, we'll to you and.
Yes. Hello, Professor. My name is Abhijit. I teach in the Department of Arts and Humanities, Christ Academy College, Bangalore. My question is regarding port cities. Now, you had mentioned that the growth trajectory of inland cities would be much more higher and much more concentrated compared to that of port cities. So if you would look at it historically, during the maritime trade and all that, it was the port city that was the locus of center and locus of culture and civilization. So how is this going to change in the neoliberal era and the years to come?
Yeah, thank you.
So, morning, and my name is Sandeep, and we've had the privilege of being there together. It's somewhat a question, really, but also for all the colleagues and participants sitting here, a question for future. So, there seems to be, and it was very nice to hear you, really fantastic. But you were talking about a form of urban entrepreneurialism, a kind of social consensus, a kind of, I don't know if you implied it, deja vu, that aise hi rahega bhai. It will be like this. So you talked the example of COVID and said, okay, workers went home without too much question. And at some stage, you referred to the question of romanticism around urban social movements. Are they oversold? Are they really not there? So I think this is a fantastic observation because it questions a lot of things. But there's the other side to the story as well, which you referred to in your remarks just now with reference to COVID and the brutalism demonstrated to citizens, CTIY, the majorities. So I think that's an issue. And you said, well, the balance is certainly not right. Let me put it. You asked a question whether, or put a question whether executive, judiciary, and all the other instruments are really in a fine balance, the Rohinton mystery balance. But I think they are off balance. I mean, from the perspective around the ground, they seem to be really off balance. I mean, when evictions happen, and evictions are only increasing. So things are not quite right. So the balance seems to have become disbalanced for sure. And the point is, this is one story. The other story is you have on eShram, somebody was referring to it in the morning. By now, I think about 32 crore registrations. These are individuals who registered as eShram informal workers. The number is surely an undercount. Because if you look at employment data, if you look at labor data, census will tell us more, the next one. But from where we analyze, I am a managing editor of Agrarian South, and we also, in the academic side of my life, dig deep into data. And I'm referring here to the ILO data. So if you look at some of the things that sub-regional classifications, fantastic ones which you gave in the context of cities, Sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia or East Asia or China or parts of Latin America, if you sort of dig that data down into the question of how much work people have had over the last 30 years and that timeline, and if you then start looking at it in terms of what's really happening to labor conditions, or workers' conditions, who are the makers of our cities anyway, who are the majorities of our cities anyway, you will find that in a secular tendency, at least in Africa, and certainly in South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa more exaggerated, but other parts of Africa as well. West Africa, even Northern Africa, if you take part of Sub-Saharan Africa or East Africa, Southern Africa as well, there is almost, if you look at employment, the people are in very little or critical or precarious employment. So which, if you dig it further, you have a continuum of what's called out of work people, a large category, a large number of people. They're running into almost more than millions, probably about 1 billion, all taken together. And then you have people in very, very half forms of work. Our own census definition is in the last week, how much work have you had? So, those kind of definitions. So really 50%, 30% unprotected employment. The best is you may have a kind of full employment, but unprotected. So there's a new class virtually of people who are out of work people. Now, these are very concentrated in cities, as the data says. So if they are concentrated in cities, there is a question. There's an agency. It's not quite a class in itself. So it is a kind of a class forming, but without that kind of a consciousness or social consciousness to take up the battle to the cities. So I think this seems to be the scenario when we are now discovering or wanting to interpret what is the agency. I am of the firm belief that suo motu state in itself, with the kind of consensus there seems to be on the surface, doesn't seem to be changing in the next couple of decades, for whatever social consensus driven by, of course, capital that you have mentioned. So how do you look at these issues? So when we talk of reclaim of the city is not a slogan. It's not going to come from 74th Constitution. There may be instruments which provide it. It's not going to come from there. So how do you see all these factors unraveling? And that is also equally well to all of us. If we want praxis, where is it coming from? Is it coming from the existing political parties? Yes, it could. Is it happening? How do you see all these processes, given the vast experience and expanse of oversight you had, starting with Belfast, where the struggles were very, very active and the murals were very inspiring? How do you sort of look at these, Professor? Because you sort of also looked at it. Kerala presents slightly different questions, but nevertheless, the core of it is the same.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for both the two questions. So I'll ask the last question first, and then I'll come to yours as well. So thank you for that perspective, because I think, as I said, having overseen the Kerala Urban Policy Commission process, it was quite significant in what we did. My faith, I'm an optimist, and my faith in the ideas of local self-governance, the idea of grassroots level, grounded grassroots level activity has been reinforced. So I'll start with that first point. So when we look at the whole idea of, and I said, it was a tongue-in-cheek in terms of the entrepreneurial, the neoliberal entrepreneurialism, that everything is entrepreneurialism, everything is entrepreneurial. But if you really look at entrepreneurialism, and if you unpack the idea of entrepreneurialism, then you find that there is social entrepreneurialism. Social entrepreneurialism is far more effective at the grassroots level than all the other forms of entrepreneurship. There's an entrepreneurialism, Adani, which is doing fantastically well with the ports in Viniam. Okay. And we also have the entrepreneurialism of the Kudumbushi, okay, the people's movement. So when we look at the ideas of social entrepreneurialism, it becomes far more meaningful, because that's what matters on a day-to-day business. And I saw it with my own eyes, because I came for 1 week to Kerala. I was in Banaras in PHU as a visiting professor in the Malviya Center, and I came to for a week's meeting in Kannur University, and I got stuck for 7.5 months. Okay, I saw with my own eyes how Kudmushri was supporting the families who had nobody to get their food and medication, etc. So the level of social enterprise, and there are many models of social enterprise, very successful models. But I think we need to revisit and see how we can strengthen the grassroots democracy, because grassroots democracy will help. Whether you look at SEVA, whether you look at any other, grassroots democracy will help reinforce the faith that people have about governance. So that's the first point. The other point which my friend raised about the port cities and how the port cities has it lost its charm. The port cities are under severe threat by climate change. Okay, so just to be very clear, Singapore and all will disappear. Dubai will disappear if the water level rises. If you look at almost all of the predictions in terms of the scientific predictions of the meltwater from the glaciers that are disappearing into the oceans, sea level rise, as I said, I asked this question, 88 centimeters, 88 millimeter rise. It's quite a significant. Maldives won't be there. You can't have Shah Rukh Khan going there for the movies. There's no chance because that will all disappear. So port cities are under severe threat from climate change. Yes, they are the epicenters of capital, of capitalism, of entrepreneurship, but they have to find other ways to survive with the changing climate. So that's the point that I want to make. Inland cities is quite significant. And if you look at all the development of airports in Noida, these are all part of the inland cities development. So even within Kerala, urban shift northward, as I mentioned, it's a very clear indication because there's no more chance to develop more cities in the south of Kerala. Where will you cannot reclaim land if the sea level rises? So climate change, climate resilient cities is going to be the next future. And that is going to be a real challenge. There's one more question you had there. Is that okay?
Very big thank you to you, Professor M. Satish Kumar, and thank you to to the cohort also for raising very incisive and insightful questions. Thank you very much for being with us. We're very grateful. A big round of applause. Okay. So with that, we will now move into the next session, which is for participants for the cohort, which is registration and a few logistics, etc. And then we have lunch. We'll proceed for lunch at 1, which will be served in the guest house. Our lovely team of volunteers will escort all of us. But yeah, so with that, thank you. You can take your seat I request the participants to remain seated. We'll quickly, Matthew, please. I think they will guide us further.
Yeah, just a quick note on the registration. The registration happens on the, there's a counter there. So please be there and you can register. And the lunch is afterwards at 1 o'clock, for which you move to the canteen as. No, they don't have to come back before lunch. Before lunch, you don't have to come back.